Chapter 27. The herd of sheep bleated and swarmed down in a panic. There were hundreds of goats in this herd, and their wool was basically greenish-gray. The white bone goat horns were like two pale sharp swords with a slightly curved arc. This herd of goats was originally leisurely gnawing on the grass when two members of the exploration team suddenly appeared and chased them away. The two of them held scimitars in their hands, but they did not use them. All they had to do was shout, and they easily drove away the panicked herd of goats. Jinjin, Zidi, Sangsu, and the others stood on a hill not far away and watched this scene from above. The herd of goats tried to change their path midway, but there were already people lying in ambush. At the critical moment, they suddenly appeared and blocked the path of the herd of goats. This herd of goats was repeatedly corrected and finally surged into a depression. The exploration team began to pull in the net, and more members came out from all directions. There were people in every direction. The goats realized that they had no way to escape and could not help but turn around on the spot. The members of the exploration team raised their swords and swung them down again and again, beginning to reap the lives of the goats. Just as Tsang Su had said, the goats were extremely cowardly. Facing the butcher's knife, they did not resist at all. They let out extremely terrified cries and then squeezed desperately, wanting to squeeze to the center. However, there were always unlucky sheep that fell to the periphery and were easily slaughtered by the humans one by one. Tsang Su looked at this scene and said calmly, "In the central part of the empire, many nobles have begun to enclose land and rear sheep on a large scale. They rear sheep. I once had the honor of visiting a few famous sheep farms in the empire. The scale was shocking. In my opinion, sheep do not have the ability to survive on their own. The reason why they can survive is because of the care of others. Sheep do not have the ability to protect themselves at all. Rams are more shy and timid than ewes. Even the slightest strange sound is enough to make them timid. Therefore, they live in groups only to relieve their fear. Not only are they cowardly, but they are also stupid. They do not know what danger is and cannot sense the arrival of danger. It seems that no matter what happens, they will stubbornly stay where they are. Even if it was windy and raining, a sheep had to lead the way if they wanted to migrate. As a matter of fact, the head of the sheep is also stationary in place, unless it is chased away by a shepherd or a shepherd dog. Sheep are very fragile. They could not walk for long periods of time, which could easily cause them to collapse. When they ran, their hearts beat too fast, and it was easy for them to suffocate. High temperatures or severe cold could kill batches of sheep. They are very susceptible to disease. Sometimes, just being fat can be fatal. Compared to sheep, goats are more active, stronger, and braver. But in general, it's pretty much the same. The habits of these two kinds of sheep are similar. Goats are attached to humans and like to be caressed by humans. It's very easy for humans to get along with goat. They are also very easy to raise, and all kinds of forage can be a delicacy for goat. However, sheep are still more popular. Because this kind of sheep had dense fur, it could be used to make wool and other textile materials. Especially in recent years, the textile machinery of the empire seems to have undergone a huge technological innovation. The Santower family is also very interested in the sheep business and sent me to the central part of the empire to investigate. Unfortunately, the nobles of the empire have the intention to monopolize the latest textile machinery. At the same time, the desert land is scarce, the environment is harsh, and the temperature difference between day and night is huge. It's impossible to use it to raise sheep on a large scale. While they were talking, more than half of the sheep had already been slaughtered. Among the team members, Huang Chao was the most eye-catching. He held a long spear in his hand, and every time he attacked, it would pierce through 3 or 4 goat. He had the strength of a bronze level, and although he could not use his do qi, his physical strength that far exceeded that of a normal person was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Jinjin handed over the first mission of encircling and suppressing the sheep to him. With the goal of redeeming himself, and knowing that his every move was being watched by his master, Huang Chao put in a lot of effort. But in the next moment, his long spear that had always been successful was blocked for the first time. It turned out that the head of the sheep was finally forced into a corner and started to resist. The head of the sheep was twice the size of the surrounding goats, almost the size of a pony, and its body was overflowing with the aura of a bronze level. The head of the sheep moved its 4 hooves, aimed at Huang Chao's direction, lowered its head, revealed its sharp white bone horns, and started to charge. Da-da-da-da! The sheep's hooves stepped on the mountain, producing a series of rapid and crisp sounds. It was one thing to be motionless, but when it moved, it was astonishing. Head Sheep, who was always slow, actually exploded with a speed that made people's expressions change. Huang Chao clenched his teeth, held the long spear horizontally in front of his chest, and stood still. Lan Zhao, who was standing behind Jinjin, saw his brother's intention and immediately shouted angrily, "Idiot, quickly dodge, you can't use your Do Qi." Huang Chao's ears moved slightly. He heard his brother's warning, but he clenched his teeth and did not move. If I run away again, what kind of impression will I leave on Master? Brother, you're the idiot. This time, I will wash away the shame. Shouting in his heart, Huang Chao widened his eyes and fiercely thrust the long spear in his hand. The tip of the long spear collided with the white bone horns. Then, under the intense change in Huang Chao's expression, the tip of the spear cracked, and the entire body of the spear was swung to the side. The head of the sheep rushed to Huang Chao's side, and at the critical moment of the collision, Huang Chao barely managed to hold the spear horizontally in front of his chest. Bang! With a muffled sound, Huang Chao was sent flying on the spot. His whole body drew an arc in the air, and then he fell on the grassy mountain rocky ground. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted on the spot. This guy. Seeing that his younger brother didn't listen to his advice and was almost cut open by the goat's horn, Cyanobacteria clenched his fists and asked for help. "Master, please let me help you deal with this goat." Jinjin only looked at the field, his expression indifferent. "Pass down the order, tell Huang Chao to restrain himself, I want to capture this head of the sheep alive." Lan Zhao's expression suddenly changed. He wanted to say something, but Song Su raised his hand to stop him. Song Su laughed. To be able to gain the trust of the Lord Jinjin, Huang Chao finally has a chance to wash away his shame. He clearly knows that in a situation where he can't use his Do Qi, his strength is no match for the head of the sheep, but he still chose to risk it. Now that he was sent flying and fell, he should know that he should adjust his state of mind. When Lan Zhao heard this, he suddenly quivered, half kneeling on the ground. "Master is benevolent and magnanimous. You already saw that Huang Chao's state of mind was unbalanced. You repeatedly gave him opportunities to adjust his state of mind and let him redeem himself. This lowly one was muddle-headed. Please punish me." Jinjin smiled and looked at Lan Zhao. "You two have a deep brotherly relationship. What's wrong with that? Go to the side and watch. After all, Huang Chao's body is still weak. If he fails to capture the sheep alive, you can take care of it for him." Lan Zhao was immediately moved to tears, kneeling on the ground, his forehead hitting the ground, making a muffled sound, and then hurriedly ran down the hill. In the depression, Huang Chao had already picked up a brand new spear, and was preparing to attack again. Seeing Lan Zhao come over, he immediately became anxious. "Brother, why are you here? Did Master ask you to take care of it for me?" Lan Zhao coldly snorted and said, "Master asked you to restrain yourself and capture this goat alive. He gave you a chance to continue showing off. Only when you fail will I take action." Huang Chao was overjoyed. "That's good." When Lan Zhao heard this, he was so angry that he almost slapped Huang Chao's head on the spot. But there was no other way. He could only stand on the side and watch. The ordinary goats were quickly slaughtered. leaving only the battle between Huang Chao and the lead goat. Under the continuous charge of the lead goat, Huang Chao was battered and exhausted. Originally, Huang Chao had a certain amount of confidence in getting rid of the lead goat with the spear in his hand. But Zhen Jin ordered to capture the lead goat alive. This made Huang Chao's hands and feet tied. Both Huang Chao and the lead goat were bronze-ranked life forms, but Huang Chao couldn't use his dou qi. He had to be careful when using his spear, cowering, so the lead goat naturally had the upper hand. But Huang Chao wanted to show off. He didn't show any signs of retreating. After a moment of deadlock, both sides were covered in blood. The lead goat's body was full of wounds caused by the tip of the spear. Huang Chao, on the other hand, was burned and wrapped in bandages. Most of the blood on his body was seeping out because of the intense exercise. Lan Zhao was secretly anxious. He wanted to take action again and again, but he didn't see his brother completely fail, so he could only resist this impulse. The lead goat charged over, and Huang Chao's physical strength was severely reduced. Although he barely avoided it this time, he was powerless to chase after it. This time, the lead goat didn't turn around and continue to fight with Huang Chao. Instead, it rushed out of the encirclement. The surrounding exploration team members were all of ordinary combat strength. They cried out in alarm and retreated one after another, not daring to use their flesh and blood to stop the lead goat who was running for his life. Lan Zhao was about to take action when he suddenly heard Zhen Jin's voice. "Enough, all of you step back, let me do it." "Master, I can still fight," Huang Chao whispered, his face full of unwillingness. "You idiot, hurry up and get down. Don't ruin Master's mood." Lan Zhao scolded angrily. Everyone's eyes were focused on Zhen Jin. Ever since Zhen Jin became the leader of this exploration team, most people were secretly guessing what level Lord Zhen Jin's strength was at. Was it silver or gold? This island strictly prohibited low-level magic and dou qi, so could Lord Zhen Jin use his own dou qi? Song Su's guess was too terrifying. It was only limited to the upper echelons of the exploration team, and not everyone knew about it. The goat charged over, but Zhen Jin's face was calm and collected. Seeing that the goat's horns were about to stab Zhen Jin, the young man suddenly reached out and accurately grabbed two of the goat's horns at the critical moment. Then, Zhen Jin pressed down hard. The lead goat's momentum came to an abrupt halt, and its entire head was pressed to the ground by Zhen Jin. The strong and powerful goat's legs kicked wildly, kicking the grass and soil into the air. But from beginning to end, Zhen Jin's hands were as steady as mountains, and his entire body was like cast iron, not shaken at all. It gave people the feeling that the lead goat was suddenly as weak as a little chick in front of Zhen Jin. Exclamations came from the mouths of the crowd, and then turned into shouts and cheers. Huang Chao couldn't help but widen his eyes. Zhen Jin didn't use his dou qi, and just used his own strength to firmly suppress the lead goat. This kind of strength convinced Huang Chao wholeheartedly. Song Su was also quietly moved by this scene. He knew very well that the body structure of humans and animals were not the same. When a person didn't use his dou qi, and just relied on his own body, it was actually very difficult to compare with a life form of the same level. Humans naturally couldn't run as fast as horses, nor could they nimbly climb trees like monkeys, nor could they fly in the sky like birds, nor could they breathe and swim underwater like fish. Compared to many wild beasts, the most prominent advantage of humans was their intelligence. A human's strength, speed, physique, and so on were not enough to look at among the wild beasts. Therefore, a strong person with silver dou qi, if he didn't use his dou qi, and just relied on his own strength, it was very likely that he would lose to a bronze magical beast. This kind of physical quality. The scene in front of him made Song Su speculate, could it be that Lord Zhen Jin really has the cultivation of gold? Chapter 28. Song Su was a scholar who had served the Sand Tower family for 38 years, so he was very clear about the strength of transcendence. A silver-ranked battle chi practitioner, if they did not use battle chi, could lift up to 350 kilograms of objects and punch out 800 kilograms of heavy punches. It would not be a problem for them to fight against 20 or 30 ordinary adults. Their tolerance to the environment and pain was higher than ordinary people, but it would still be dangerous for them to face powerful crossbows. In other words, the physical quality of a silver-ranked battle chi practitioner was still in the human category. They were bound by the structure of the human body and represented the limit of the development of the mortal body. But after becoming a gold-ranked battle chi practitioner, the quality of battle chi would be greatly improved. Such battle chi would nourish and transform the body, completely surpassing the limits of mortals. Without using battle chi, a gold-ranked warrior could run up to 120 kilometers per hour and lift up to 10 tons of heavy object. Facing thousands of soldiers and horses wielding swords, they could also kill generals and capture flags. Ordinary crossbows and arrows were not a threat at all. But facing a magic crossbow, there was still a risk. When the sheep was fighting with the yellow algae, Sang Soo saw with his own eyes that the sheep crashed into tree trunks several times, knocking down towering trees. This proved that although the sheep was only bronze-ranked, when it desperately charged, the impact was very strong. It was far greater than the charge of a normal heavy armored cavalry. A silver-ranked battle chi practitioner, purely relying on physical strength, could not resist the charge of the sheep. However, Jin easily intercepted the charging sheep that had run for a long distance. The strength displayed in this was beyond the silver rank. Therefore, Sang Soo could not help but speculate that Jin might have gold-ranked battle chi. As far as I know, the Blood of the Hundred Needles family is not good at strength, but it is unique in the aspect of accuracy. If a knight has a permanent support spell such as the Bear's Strength, he can also achieve this step. But here, magic is forbidden, so permanent low-level support spells should be ineffective. Or has he taken some strength potion? Finally, Sang Soo thought of the possibility of a gold-ranked warrior. If Zhen Jin is really a gold-rank expert, with such strength and talent, the Hundred Needles clan will definitely rise again. Under Sang Soo's gaze, Zhen Jin suddenly shook his arms, grabbed the goat's horns, and suddenly raised the head goat high. Then, he threw it out. The head goat fell to the ground and struggled for a while before it got up. It had a dazed look on its face, as if it had been stunned by the fall. Then, its eyes turned red as it charged towards Zhen Jin. Zhen Jin pressed it down again and let it struggle for a while before throwing it far away. After this happened a few times, Lead Sheep's unwillingness, anger, hatred, and other emotions dissipated. Instead, it was replaced by fear and cowardice towards Zhen Jin. In the end, the sheep did not charge forward. After it fell to the ground, it stood up and did not move. When Zhen Jin took the initiative to walk in front of it, it bleated and lowered its head. Its eyes were averted, and its bleeding body kept trembling. Zhen Jin patted its head and then touched its horns. Lead Sheep was so scared that its body shook, and it actually took the initiative to lie down on the ground. Under many admiring gazes, Zhen Jin nodded with satisfaction and ordered, "Take it away from me. Treat it a little and feed it carefully, but don't let it be full." "Sir, do you want to tame this sheep into a mount?" Seeing that the battle was over, Sang Soo came over. Zhen Jin nodded and asked with a smile, "Do you think it's possible?" "Of course it is." Sang Soo smiled and said with certainty, "As far as I know, the most popular mount in the dwarf continent is goats. Goats can trek through high mountains and steep ridges, and their skills are extremely high. 1-year-old wild goats can use skillful climbing skills to climb snow-covered rocks, and along the way, they can cross many obstacles that we humans can't surpass. But I don't know the specific taming method." Zhen Jin nodded and asked again, "Among the survivors of the Pig's Kiss, are there any beast tamers?" Sang Soo shook his head. "I don't think so. It doesn't matter. If the Pig's Kiss isn't there, can't you find one in White Sand City?" Zhen Jin patted the old scholar's shoulder. In this battle, he had obtained what he wanted. Subduing this sheep and taming it into a mount in the future was only a secondary part of the harvest. The main point was that Zhenjin showed his strength in front of everyone. He let everyone in the exploration team see his strength. His influence on this group of people had been greatly improved. The lesson of Huang Zhao's betrayal and escape once was enough. Zhenjin had already remembered the teachings of the Hundred Needles clan in his heart, and he even put Huang Zhao in front of his eyes. On one hand, he squeezed out his value, and on the other hand, he used him to constantly remind himself how to be a qualified leader. Looking around, Zhenjin let out a heartfelt sigh. This is a treasure land. To be honest, it was the first time he had found such a paradise on this island. When they really started, the exploration team was pleasantly surprised to find that the scale of the sheep here far exceeded the results of the previous investigation. For some reason, the sheep here were simply overflowing. There were several large-scale flocks of more than 1,000 sheep. There were even more flocks of hundreds of sheep. Zhenjin was hunting such a flock of sheep this time. The exploration team members began to deal with the dead sheep. First, they bled, skinned, and removed the internal organs. Then, some people began to cut the sheep, while others washed the sheep's skin and stomach. After the sheep was cut, it would be placed on the bonfire and roasted with smoke. In this way, the water in the sheep could dissipate, so it could be stored for a longer time. After the sheep's skin was washed, it had to be smoked, dried, and other processes. The sheep's skin could be made into leather clothes, and the stomach could be made into a bag to hold water. After that, the exploration team was busy here for 3 days in a row. Under Zhenjin's command, everyone hunted another 3 flocks of sheep. Under Zhenjin's personal command, even the bronze-level head sheep was subdued. Most of the adult goats were killed, but a portion of the lambs were kept alive for the time being under Zhenjin's special instructions. These goats were easy to feed, so it was not a big burden to raise dozens of lambs and the 4 bronze-headed sheep. This was the benefit of having more people. If it was just Zhenjin and ZD, they would not have the time and energy to do so. On the 4th day, the exploration team officially returned. At this moment, the appearance of the entire team had undergone a huge change. Almost everyone was covered in a layer of leather clothing. The leather clothes were very simple and crude. It was just a simple hole cut out to cover the head. On both sides of the body, under the armpits, there were woven vines that tied the front and back of the sheepskin together. The side of the green-black wool was left on the inside, against the body, and the side of the yellow sheepskin was turned outside. On the back of everyone there was a huge animal skin bag, which was mainly filled with smoked lamb jerky. Other than that, there were water bags. Many water bags made of sheep's stomach were tied to the waists of the members. The food and water reserves were very abundant, almost reaching the limit of the entire team's burden. After all, there was a limit to how much weight everyone could carry. Huang Zhao was scouting at the front of the team. Zhenjin, ZD, and Sang-Su walked in the middle of the team. At the back was the flock of sheep, mainly led by Lan Zhao. Other than the dozens of lambs, the main focus was the 4 bronze-headed sheep. At this moment, these sheep were wearing simple reins made of vines, and a lot of supplies were hanging on their bodies. The main things were dried meat, fresh water, tents, backup weapons, and so on. The entire morning, the team trekked through the mountains and rivers, moving forward in the forest. During this period, they only rested a few times, each time less than 15 minutes. At noon, they finally had half an hour of rest. The entire team was divided into 2 parts. One part was on guard, checking supplies, and so on. The other part sat cross-legged on the ground and ate lunch. Sang-Su led people to carefully check the front and back of the team. No one was missing. Food, water, and other supplies were checked. The flock of sheep, which was the most worrisome, was also very calm. Behind the cracked glasses was the old scholar's carefully observing eyes. He found that the people who were eating were very relaxed. Some were teasing each other, Some were eating while rubbing their calves, trying to relax as much as possible. And the people who were on guard all had spirited eyes and puffed out their chests. The morale of the entire team was quite high. This exploration team had set off from the beginning, and Sang-soo was among them. He had never seen these people emit such an aura of vitality. He understood the key reason for all of this. It was not the fragrant dried lamb, nor was it a relatively stable journey, but the young knight, Zhenjin. All of these changes were brought about by him. His powerful strength gave everyone a strong sense of security, and it greatly increased the hope in everyone's hearts. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao had become his slaves, and these days they had been working hard to perform. Although Zhenjin had not revealed his douqi, his deep background and suspected gold rank cultivation made the brothers feel that their future was bright and brilliant. Along the way, ZD followed Zhenjin closely, almost never leaving his side. She was the president of the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce. At the same time, her skillful method of making potions in the past few days also appeared in Sang-soo's mind. Sang-soo's gaze finally stopped on Zhenjin. In most of his life, he had seen too many nobles, and now he was sure that among all the young nobles, Zhenjin was definitely among the top few. He was talented, powerful, and even more commendable was that he was a qualified leader. Under his influence, the whole team was united and their morale was high. Sang-soo could foresee that the fallen Hundred Needles clan would rise again because of Zhenjin. If possible, I would like to follow such a noble and witness his great achievements step by step, so that I can also participate in the rise of the Hundred Needles clan. Perhaps hundreds of years later, as a scholar, my name will accompany him and become one of the symbols of wisdom recognized by future generations. What a wonderful thing! What a pity! If only I could meet such a person when I was young. The regret in his heart did not show on the old scholar's face. He walked to Jin Zhen's side and reported the results of the investigation in the same respectful tone that he had always used. Very good, Mr. Sang-soo. Thanks to your advice, we were able to hunt enough meat and have such a plentiful store. Now sit down and let's have some lunch together. Needlework invited. Sang-soo said, my suggestion is only secondary. If not for your guidance, how could we be in such a situation? Zhenjin smiled. After getting along with Sang-soo these days, he was more and more satisfied with him. Although this old scholar was an ordinary person, his brain was not ordinary. The direction of the team was decided by him. What he used was only a wooden stick stuck in the ground and the sunlight shining on it. Sang-soo's attitude and actions were always protecting Zhenjin's identity as a noble, which made Zhenjin feel comfortable. His ability to handle matters was also very strong, and he was quite steady and reliable. The more he used the gold needles, the more proficient he became. If Sang-soo had some strength, even if it was black iron level, he would be the best candidate to be a noble's butler. Unfortunately, he did not have extraordinary talent, which was a pity. Even so, Zhenjin wanted to keep Sang-soo by his side as much as possible. This was a talent. His knowledge was even higher than ZD's. ZD was a mage. Of course, this was also because ZD was too young, and when she was studying, she put most of her energy into pharmaceutics. Needless to say, Zhenjin could guess that the reason why ZD did this was because good pharmaceutics often had huge market prospects and could bring in huge profit. The further away they were from the snowy peaks, the higher the temperature. The sun at noon was the strongest, and the newly made leather clothes began to have the effect of keeping them warm. Maybe it was because they had eaten and drunk enough, but everyone started to look a little listless. There were already people outside the team who had taken over to keep watch. No one gave any warning, and a fatal crisis quietly struck in such a quiet atmosphere. First, it was the cry of a young man in the team. Sir, it's not good. Those lambs are all lying on the ground, motionless, they're all dead." "What?" Zhenjin could not help but change his expression. This was really bad news. This batch of lambs was very useful. On the one hand, the exploration team could kill them as a last resort. On the other hand, if they successfully arrived at White Sand City and this batch of lambs was still alive, they could raise them and then tame them. In this way, Zhenjin could cultivate some cavalry. Zhenjin's plan was ruined. He immediately stood up and wanted to inspect it himself. "Do you know the reason?" he asked the young man who called the police. He had recognized this young man long ago. His name was Baiya, and he was born a hunter. He took the pig's kiss to White Sand City to join the army. Baiya looked flustered and hurriedly shook his head. I don't know. Everything happened suddenly, sir." Zhenjin grunted and was about to take a step when a strong wave of dizziness suddenly hit him. He was caught off guard, and his body swayed violently, almost falling to the ground on the spot. He managed to stand still, but found that the exploration team members, who were still full of morale just now, were all lying on the ground. Almost instantly, most of the members fainted on the spot. ZD, Huang Zhao, Lan Zhao, and the others were still barely supporting themselves. "What's going on? Everyone seems to have been poisoned. What kind of poison is this?" Huang Zhao suddenly took out a dagger from her pocket and shouted angrily at the young man Baiya. "Everyone is poisoned. Why are you the only one who is fine? Are you the one who poisoned him?" Chapter 29. Almost the entire exploration team had been poisoned, except for Baiya. Facing Huang Zhao's angry rebuke, Baiya's face was full of panic. He kept shaking his head and retreating step by step. Finally, he staggered and fell to the ground. "It wasn't me, it really wasn't me," Baiya shouted, trying his best to deny it. Huang Zhao approached him step by step. Suddenly, he fell to the ground. His face was ashen, and his expression was ferocious. He looked like a patient who had fallen into an ice cave and was soaked in bone-chilling water for a long time before he was fished out at the last moment of his life. "Why aren't you poisoned?" Huang Zhao fell to the ground, still staring at Baiya unwillingly. He squeezed the words out from between his teeth. On the other side, Lan Zhao suddenly exclaimed in a low voice, "Ah! Could it be that the owner of this island made a move? In addition to killing all of us with poison, he also left one person alive so that he could go out and spread the news? It's like a big pirate. After looting a ship, he deliberately let some people go and spread their bad reputation." Huang Zhao still had some consciousness left. Hearing this, he was very confused. "Who is it? Does this island still have an owner?" Previously, Zhenjin and the others did not tell the others about the results of their discussion in the tent. Even Huang Zhao was kept in the dark. Because the results of these discussions were mostly guesses, there was no direct evidence. If it was revealed, it would be a great blow to the morale of the entire team. It would make people worried and anxious, and it was even possible for them to have an emotional breakdown. Whether it was Huang Zhao or Lan Zhao, they all fell to the ground. In the entire team, only Zhenjin was barely able to support himself and stand up straight. Even so, the youth felt his body getting colder and colder, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Lan Zhao, who had fallen to the ground, struggled to stand up. He tried several times but failed. He glanced at Baiya and suddenly stopped. He shouted, "I remember now. He didn't eat the mutton, not even a bite. This mutton is poisonous." "The mutton's poison?" ZD was stunned when she heard this. Before eating the mutton, she had clearly verified that it was not poisonous. "Is it related to the quantity? Are we poisoned because we ate too much?" Zhenjin asked with a frown. ZD shook her head and smiled bitterly. "I've already verified such a simple possibility. But there could also be some kind of poison that I didn't detect. Baiya, did you really not eat a single bite of the mutton?" Baiya nodded and stammered, "Why yes, sir. I don't like mutton. I've been eating dry rations these days. Seeing Bai Yu's performance, Zhen Jin turned his attention to ZD. If Bai Yu was plotting something, this would be the best time for him to act. At this moment, Zhen Jin was almost powerless to resist. Looking at it from another angle, even if Bai Yu was up to no good, it was too stupid of him to choose to poison him at this time. In the wilderness, having teammates around you could increase your chances of survival. The risk of escaping alone was too high. ZD had already fallen to the ground. Her eyes flashed with a thoughtful light. Lord Jinjin, please come over. Use the dagger on my body and cut a wound on my arm, okay? Jinjin nodded and moved reluctantly to ZD's side. He pulled out the hilt of the dagger from her calf. The sharp edge of the dagger lightly scratched ZD's tender and firm arm, leaving a thin and long wound. From the wound, ZD's flesh and blood had already turned green. Blood should have been flowing out, but at this moment only a little was flowing out. The temperature of the blood was relatively low, and the red blood was mixed with a strange greenish-gray color. Jinjin immediately thought of zombies. He felt a cold air surge out from the wound and couldn't help but murmur, "Is it really cold poison?" ZD furrowed her brows. The scene in front of her seemed to be cold poison, but it was also not. Vaguely, ZD thought of something, but she couldn't really grasp the light that flashed in her mind. I don't have much time. ZD could clearly feel her body becoming stiffer and colder. Soon, her heart would be frozen and completely stop beating. ZD knew that she had to make a decision as soon as possible. Sir, red white mushroom bottle cap. ZD pointed at the small leather bag at her waist with a stiff finger. Jinjin immediately opened the small leather bag, revealing the densely packed and neatly arranged small bottles of medicine. There were 3 bottles of medicine that matched ZD's description. Jinjin quickly identified them and found that the 3 were the same. He also knew that ZD had a good habit. ZD would try to use different sizes of bottles, corks, labels, and other elements for each medicine to unify and differentiate them. Opening the white mushroom bottle cap, Jinjin put the pinky-shaped glass bottle to ZD's lip. ZD opened her mouth with difficulty, and Jinjin began to pour the red, viscous medicine from the bottle. After taking a small sip, ZD suddenly rolled her eyes and fainted completely. Such a strange change stunned the people who were still conscious. Jinjin's heart sank to the bottom in an instant. The only pharmacist was unconscious. What should he do? Take off the sheepskin, go back, go back. At this moment, Sang-Su's hoarse and weak voice was heard. After saying this sentence with all his strength, he fainted again. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were very convinced by Sang-Su's words. Huang Zhao could no longer move, but Lan Zhao still had some ability to move. He immediately took off the woolen leather coat on his body. After taking off the coat for a few breaths, Lan Zhao had a clear feeling. It's working. I feel that my whole body is starting to feel warm again, Lan Zhao exclaimed in a low voice. It was very strange. The biggest function of the woolen leather coat was to keep people warm. Previously, when they were near the snowy peak, these newly made woolen leather coats made people feel happy. But now, after taking off the warm leather coats, it made the frozen and stiff body regain some vitality. What was going on? Jinjin didn't have time to think too much. Although he didn't understand, he immediately ordered Bai Ye to take off the woolen leather coats on the exploration team members who had fallen to the ground. After these leather coats were taken off, most of the members who had fallen to the ground and hadn't fainted yet had the strength to stand up. ZD, Sang-Su, and the others were still unconscious with their eyes closed. Carry them, we'll go back immediately. Zhen Jin's attitude was firm and he didn't hesitate. Everyone who was awake knew that the matter was urgent. They tried their best to drag the unconscious members back the way they came. Sang-Su, ZD, Huang Zhao, and the others were carried on the white-boned sheep. More than half of the sheep that Jinjin had ordered to be captured had been killed or injured. Only the 4 strongest bronze-level leaders were left. The rest of the lambs were completely dead. The more they walked back, the better everyone felt. Their strength gradually returned to their bodies. Although the temperature in the air was getting lower and lower, everyone's torsos and hands and feet were no longer stiff and cold. Instead, they became warm. Finally, when everyone returned to the place where they had hunted the sheep, many of them had recovered to their original state. ZD and Sang-Soo had also woken up. ZD untied the bandage on her arm and checked the wound that had been cut not long ago. She found that the originally greenish-gray wound had returned to the normal color of flesh and blood. At the same time, blood flowed out naturally. It was no longer as terrifying as the zombies from before. It was as if everything that had happened before was just a nightmare. However, the 2 corpses were still a cold reminder to everyone that everything had happened. Yes, the exploration team had lost 2 people. These 2 people had fallen into a coma and didn't wake up during the process of returning. Finally, when they returned to the original place, their life force had completely dissipated. I understand why there are so many goats here. It's because these are highly poisonous things. Whoever eats them will have to pay the price with their life. Huang Zhao's face revealed a frightened expression. This is a curse, a devil's curse. We can only stay here. As long as we are a little further away from here, we will be poisoned again and die. Everyone was discussing animatedly. They were all very frightened, looking at the goats leisurely grazing in the distance with fear. The morale of the entire exploration team had dropped very badly. Shut up. Calm down. At this moment, Zhenjin stood up, looked around, and shouted in a low voice. Over the past few days, he had already built up enough prestige in the team. At this moment, with his order, everyone obediently shut up and there were no more sounds of conversation. Zhenjin knew very well that it was not enough to just suppress them. He also had to ease and release the fear in everyone's hearts. Therefore, he continued to speak. With me here, what are you panicking for? Things are far from out of control. Don't forget, we still have Miss ZD. Not only is she a magician, but she is also a pharmacist with extraordinary abilities. Zhenjin seemed to have forgotten that ZD had just drunk the potion and fainted on the spot. However, there were many people who had seen this scene. On the way back, those who knew about it even spread the news. Could she really do it? Zhenjin naturally understood the hesitation in everyone's hearts. He smiled confidently. Previously, we didn't know the cause of the poisoning. It's very normal to make mistakes in diagnosis and treatment. When using medicine, it has always been about the right medicine. Now that we know the cause, it's completely different. How can a mere flock of sheep trap our hands and feet? Everyone, I still have to lead you out of this island. It's too early to give up now. Everyone's perplexed and frightened expressions began to change. Zhenjin had blonde hair, fair skin, a high nose bridge, and eyes like the morning stars. Just his appearance alone was outstanding and handsome. He was also the only heir of the 100 Needles clan, a holy knight of the strongest army of the human race, and one of the competitors for the position of White Sand City's lord. Even though he was only wearing a broken chain mail, carrying a spear on his back, and the long saber at his waist were all crudely made, all of these difficulties only served to accentuate the young man's tenacity and indomitable spirit. He was like the rising sun at dawn. The sunlight was not dazzling, but it brought people hope. He was also like the flag fluttering in the wind at the top of a white castle under the blue sky. As long as one saw such a flag, they would inevitably be attracted and led by it. ZD and Sang-Soo looked at the current Zhenjin in a daze and were speechless. Sir, with you here, there's nothing to be afraid of. You're a knight, a holy knight. This time, it's you who saved us. Baya shouted excitedly, breaking the silence. Master, us 2 brothers will follow you to death, no matter when or where, no matter if the sky falls or the earth sinks. Lan Zhao also expressed his loyalty. The crowd gradually became noisy. Lord Zhenjin is right. Follow Lord Zhenjin, we will definitely be able to escape from here. That's right. I entrust my life to you, sir. Chapter 30. Zhenjin looked around and saw that everyone had calmed down. Their eyes flashed with hope, and he was slightly relieved. Then, he ordered Huang Zhao to lead everyone to rebuild the camp. At the same time, they set up a perimeter and set up defensive trap. In the tent, Zhenjin, Sangsu, ZD, and Lan Zhao gathered together again. Sangsu was the first to open his mouth and admit his mistake. This is all my fault. I didn't expect that the meat of the goats would be poisonous. I was blinded by the benefits in front of me. When I discovered that the goats were too big, I should have realized that something was wrong and be vigilant of the possible risks. Zhenjin shook his head slightly and comforted him. This island is dangerous and strange. We all want to get more food. This isn't your fault alone, Mr. Tsang-su. As the leader, it's even harder for me to escape the blame. However, there's no point in dwelling on these mistakes now. Think carefully, how can we solve this problem? Sangsu sighed and expressed his opinion. Now that everyone is suffering from the cold poison, this cold poison is very strange. On the surface, as long as we leave this place for a certain distance, the cold poison will act up. But in fact, I think it's because of the temperature. This place is close to the snowy peak, the temperature is lower, and the cold poison doesn't act up. After we leave the snowy peak, the further we go, the higher the temperature. After reaching a certain temperature, the cold poison in our body will be triggered. There's a direct proof for this point, and that's the wool and leather clothes. When we take off the wool and leather clothes on our body temperature drops rapidly, and the symptoms of the cold poison lessen a lot. That's all I know about the cold poison. After Tsang-su finished speaking, he looked at ZD. Not only him, but Zhenjin and Lan Zhao also looked at ZD. In fact, everyone knew that the problem involved poison. As a pharmacist, ZD had the most right to speak. Since ZD regained her mobility, she used mutton, her own blood, and so on to test the medicine. At this moment, she was holding a glass test tube in her hand and was carefully pouring a kind of particle into it. The test tube was originally filled with a blood-like liquid, but after the particles were mixed in, it suddenly boiled like water, and a large number of bubbles popped out. Finally, with a soft bang, the entire test tube exploded. The bright red liquid inside spilled onto the carpet in the tent. ZD didn't care about the liquid. She bent down, widened her bright purple eyes, and used her fingers to carefully pick up the small particles on the carpet. After a dozen or so breaths, she had collected quite a number of particles and gathered them in her palm. She examined the tiny particles carefully. Immediately, she keenly discovered that there were various cracks on these small particles, and these cracks were not purely transparent cracks, but had a clear gray color. Seeing this, ZD's eyes lit up. Everyone, I think I've found the real reason. What kind of cold poison is it? Zhenjin asked. ZD shook her head slightly. Actually, goat meat doesn't have any cold poison. Before eating the goat meat, for safety's sake, I've already tested it in many ways. The results weren't wrong, the goat meat is indeed not poisonous. Everyone was puzzled. Then what's wrong with us? Could it be that something else poisoned us? ZD shook her head again. It's the goat meat that caused the problem. Zhenjin and Lan Zhao's faces were even more puzzled. But Sang-su's mind flashed, and he blurted out, could it be that the magic power is out of balance? Yes, that's the reason. ZD sighed, and then explained in detail. This place is close to the snowy peaks, and the surrounding environment has a high concentration of frost element. The goat herds live and reproduce here, and the frost elements in the air seep into their bodies. If these goats are natural creatures, their bodies can coordinate magic power and accumulate magic power in an orderly manner. When this stable magic power accumulates more and more, it will change qualitatively and condense into magic crystals. But according to our previous conjecture, these goats are man-made creatures. Although their flesh and blood structure is stable, they don't have the ability to coordinate magic power. They have always been protected by the anti-magic environment. The frost elements in the goats' bodies can't be perfectly and naturally digested and absorbed. Although they can be converted into magic power, this kind of magic power is very chaotic and contradictory. Not only can it not form magic crystals, but it also has a special characteristic, which is that when the temperature is low, it is relatively stable and quietly lurks in the body. When the temperature reaches a certain level, it will suddenly erupt, forming symptoms similar to cold poison. I thought I was suffering from cold poison, so I took an antidote made with fire element materials. As a result, the fire element magic power in the antidote stimulated the ice element magic power even more. Under the two conflicting effects, I passed out on the spot. ZD paused and then continued. Because of this, after we take off the wool and leather clothes, our body temperature quickly drops, and the ice element magic power tends to stabilize and converge, so our condition quickly improves. So that's how it is. Hearing this analysis, everyone couldn't help but be enlightened. This kind of situation was actually very common in the cultivation of extraordinaries. For example, when a mage made a mistake during meditation, the ice element conversion magic power was not successful. After eroding the whole body, the body would be poisoned by cold poison, and even the whole body would be frozen. Qi cultivators, such as warriors, knights, swordsmen, and so on, ate magic beast meat or took potions, but they couldn't digest the huge amount of magic power in it, and it would also cause a backlash. Not only for cultivators, this kind of phenomenon was even more common in nature. If the murlocs who lived in the sea for a long time entered the desert during the day, their skin would become dry and even cracked, and their spirit would become sluggish, and so on. This was because the desert during the day was full of fire element, light element, and so on. Immersed in such an environment, the murlocs would inevitably absorb light element and fire element. Although these elements were not actively absorbed, they formed magic power on the surface of the skin. These magic powers would conflict with the water element magic power built in the murlocs' bodies, causing the skin to become dry and cracked, and symptoms of sluggishness. In the north, a lush sycamore tree suddenly ushered in a snowstorm. After the snowstorm, all the leaves of the sycamore tree fell, leaving only bare branches, and many parts of the tree were frostbitten. This was caused by the sudden surge of the ice element, causing magic power erosion. Correspondingly, there were also many ways to resist magic power erosion in nature. For example, the pine trees in the snow could maintain the stability of their own wood element magic power in an environment rich in ice element. Another example was the rhinoceros in the prairie. In order to resist the scorching sun, they often rolled in the mud, building mud armor to resist the scorching sun. At the same time, it could also prevent mosquito bite. This was the construction of a layer of earth element magic power to replace their own skin, carrying out a war of attrition, and defending against magic power erosion from the outside world. Wait, according to Lady ZD's explanation, isn't this mutton good stuff? On the surface it looks like ordinary beast meat, but it actually contains magic power, and can be counted as magic beast meat. Magic beast meat is an expensive cultivation resource. As a basic bronze elite, Lan Zhao was very sensitive to cultivation resources, and quickly exclaimed in a low voice. Indeed, in the process of qi cultivation, the demand for magic beast meat was very high. For example, people who cultivated fire qi usually ate fire element magic beast meat. On one hand, magic beast meat was rich in nutrients, and long-term consumption would strengthen the cultivator's own life foundation. On the other hand, magic beast meat contained fire element magic power. After a qi cultivator ate magic beast meat, the magic power in the food would also seep into the cultivator's body. If left alone, this foreign magic power would bring harm. But when the cultivator used fire chi, they could quickly absorb and transform this magic power, not only eliminating the hidden dangers, but more importantly, increasing their chi. Hearing Lan Zhao's words, Sang-Su nodded slightly and agreed. According to what you said, there is indeed such a possibility. The difference between magic beast meat and ordinary meat is whether or not it contains magic power. It's just that compared to ordinary magic beast meat, the magic power contained in this mutton is more special. When the temperature is very low, the magic power is quite restrained, hidden deep in the body and more stable. When the temperature is high enough, the magic power will show its chaotic nature, and the magic power will burst out, causing a threat to the life of the consumer. If there's an excellent ice element combat chi that can withstand and convert this ice element magic, then this goat meat would be valuable magic beast meat to these people. It's just that I don't think there are many of them. Zhenjin had a thoughtful expression on his face. Battle aura arts was a method of using battle aura to construct the coordination, balance, and circulation of the mana within one's body. There were many battle chi arts, and their quality varied. Not only did an excellent do chi technique require the creator to be extremely talented, it also required generations of people to perfect it. Those do chi techniques that occupied the top of the pagoda and were publicly recognized by everyone were extremely few in number. One could count them with 10 fingers. For example, the Shengming Emperor's Holy Do Chi, the Icehall Duke's Polar Snow Do Chi, and the Crescent Sun Sword Saint's Blazing Do Chi. The more outstanding the battle chi art was, the more efficient it was at absorbing and transforming the mana within the magical beast meat. Under normal circumstances, the magic power in magical beast meat was relatively balanced and stable. After processing, the speed of dissipation was not fast. This magic power was easy to sense, absorb, and transform. But goat meat was clearly not normal. Goats themselves were not natural product. The magic power contained in their bodies was rich, far beyond their level of life. The structure of the goat herd was also very chaotic. Most of them were ordinary beasts, and only a few were bronze-level creatures. If the magic power in the goat meat were to explode, it would be able to immobilize the bronze-level Lan Zhao and Huang Zhao. But when it was silent and restrained, whether it was Zhenjin, Lan Zhao, or ZD, they would not be able to sense it. These two characteristics of the magic structure both raised the requirements of the ice element combat aura by a large margin. Chapter 31. If this kind of goat meat could be developed, it would indeed have a high commercial value. Sang-Su thought of more. He raised an index finger. Firstly, the magic contained in ordinary goat meat far surpasses that of a bronze-level magical beast meat under normal circumstances. The cost of rearing ordinary goats and the same number of bronze-level magical beasts are two completely different concepts. The difference is huge. Then, he raised his middle finger. Secondly, although the magic structure of goat meat is strange and dangerous, when it is in a low-temperature state, the magic is very restrained and stable. This is a natural storage advantage. Under normal circumstances, once a magical beast is killed, the magic power contained within its body will continuously flow out of its body. At this time, mages and alchemists are usually required to deal with the magical beast's body parts, lock in the magic within, and try to extend the stability of the magic structure as much as possible. Take the giant mouth hunting group, the largest magical beast hunting group in the Xingming continent, as an example. After they kill a magical beast, there will be professional personnel on the spot to cut off the magical beast's body parts and seal them one by one. Then, they will transport them to the camp and use a magic formation to strengthen the seal. Even with layers of seals, these magical materials that originated from magical beasts will constantly leak out magic, and their value will constantly drop with the passage of time. Therefore, the giant mouth hunting group will not hesitate to use a teleportation formation to transport extremely valuable magical materials. The processing and transportation costs are very high, and the stronger the magical beast, the more so. Therefore, when the conditions are right, the giant mouth hunting group will try their best to capture magical beasts alive instead of killing them on the spot. They will first transport the living magical beasts to the big cities, then kill them there and directly sell the fresh magical materials. But there is also a problem. The cost of feeding magical beasts is also very high. Looking after and suppressing magical beasts requires a powerful extraordinaire, and the maintenance and consumption of manpower is also very high. At this point, Sang-Soo changed the topic to the goat meat in front of them, but our goat meat is different. As long as we can create a low temperature, the ice magic in the goat meat will be relatively stable, and very little will leak out. This is a very big advantage, and will save us a lot of storage and transportation costs. Sang-Soo was very knowledgeable, and was also very familiar with the business of hunting and selling magical beasts. Jinjin's heart palpitated as he listened. Resources were very important. Jinjin had his eyes on these goats. His original idea was to use these goats as mounts to develop cavalry. In the future, when he became the Lord of White Sand City, if he could have an elite cavalry, it would be of great help to him in controlling the entire situation. Therefore, Jinjin wasn't afraid of trouble. He had personally subdued 4 bronze-ranked white bone goats and captured many little lambs to try to raise them. But in the end, these little lambs were all poisoned to death. The 4 bronze head lambs were lucky enough to survive. Everyone was also poisoned by the goat meat. It could be said that Zhen Jin's goat cavalry plan was a complete failure. But now, he found another possibility, and that was to directly sell goat meat. This was life. Plans can never keep up with changes. The cold reality brought disaster, breaking people's dreams and plans, but it often brought gifts at the same time, allowing people to always have hope. Hope existed forever. The key was whether or not people could see it. Many people couldn't see hope and fell into despair. Because to see hope, one didn't simply need a pair of bright eyes, but also a good mentality or deep wisdom. Zidi's purple eyes were shining. She agreed with Sang-Soo's words and said, "If we can find an extraordinaire who can smoothly digest these goat meat, then this will indeed be a huge business. Because ordinary goats are too easy to catch, we can even participate in artificial large-scale breeding. The cost of raising and transporting these goats is much lower than that of bronze and black iron beasts. The profits of this business are quite high, and there's also a wonderful part. As long as we sell them in large quantities at a low price, this business will also allow us to establish relations with the top nobles of the empire." Lan Zhao's expression couldn't hide his excitement. From this point of view, these goats are walking, bleeding piles of gold coins. The purple-eyed girl looked at Zhen Jin with bright eyes. "Lord Jinjin, if we develop and control this business, it will undoubtedly be of great help to you. Whether it's competing for the position of the Lord of White Sand City or becoming the Lord of White Sand City, you will need a large amount of funds. And this business is like attaching a pair of wings to your back. It may even bring us the support of the top nobles." Jinjin nodded. He knew the prospects and benefits, but he still maintained a calm expression. This matter still needs to be considered at length. The key now is still to solve the problem of the chaotic magic power in our bodies. The atmosphere in the tent calmed down a little. Letting the ice magic power lurk in people's bodies was absolutely not a good idea. Because even if the magic power's activity was very low, it would still secretly continue to corrode people's bodies. It seemed fine for a short period of time, but in fact, the magic power was constantly damaging people's vitality. At the same time, once the body temperature rose, the magic power would be a fatal killer lurking in people's bodies. Jinjin didn't want this to happen. He needed to solve his own problem, and at the same time save the lives of others. He also needed to bring this group of people to the continent of the orcs to compete for the position of the Lord of White Sand City. So how to solve this problem? The gazes of everyone in the tent still fell on ZD. They still needed to see the performance of this pharmacist. Especially at this moment, low-level magic and Do-Chi could not be used. ZD's face was solemn. She also felt the heavy burden on her shoulders. She muttered, "I need to conduct an experiment first, so I can't give an answer for now." Zhenjin nodded. "What do you need? We will fully cooperate with you." Zhenjin directly gave his tent to ZD. Lan Zhao led the team to start killing a large number of goats again. Song Su personally presided over the dissection, and Zhenjin even killed a bronze head goat. The flesh, bones, and fur of the goats that contained magic power were transported into the tent in batches. The lights in the tent were lit from evening until late at night. Then, when it was close to dawn, ZD, with a pair of heavy dark circles under her eyes, lifted the curtain of the tent. "I need grass." Grass? Zhenjin had been waiting outside the tent. "The more of this grass the goats eat, the better. Remember, it has to be connected to the roots," ZD instructed. Zhenjin nodded and immediately issued the corresponding order. Fortunately, he had these subordinates and had plenty of manpower. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to meet ZD's urgent needs alone. Standing outside the tent, Zhenjin watched the sky gradually brighten, knowing that the night was about to pass. He didn't know how ZD was progressing. He was worried, but he never showed it on his face. He stood outside the tent, his hand on the rough wooden handle, his body as straight as a spear. The exploration team members passing by outside the tent, every time they saw Zhenjin's figure, their impetuous hearts calmed down, and the hope in their hearts increased by a little. Everyone dug out the grass by the root. After taking out the soil, the grass was sent into the tent in piles. The tent was like a bear that had just finished hibernation, constantly devouring, revealing an astonishing appetite. Zhenjin could smell all kinds of strange smells coming from the tent. When the sun illuminated the east and the morning glow filled the sky, ZD's voice came from the tent. "Lord Zhenjin, are you still there?" "Yes," Zhenjin immediately replied. "Then please come in." Zhenjin's spirits were lifted. He immediately turned around, lifted the curtain, and entered the tent. The smell in the tent was even more pungent, and there was even a faint mist lingering around it. ZD's face was haggard, but her crystal-clear eyes revealed a hint of excitement. "Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you." ZD raised the glass bottle in her hand. Inside the bottle was an azure liquid like seawater. "It turns out that these goats are victims like us. What really contains ice magic is actually these grasses. The life aura of these grasses is very ordinary, but in fact, they contain extremely rich ice magic in their bodies. After the goats ate these grasses, the magic entered the goats' bodies. Later, we ate the goats' flesh and blood, which is how we were infected with this special magic." The truth that ZD said surprised Zhenjin. "In that case, these grasses are comparable to magic plants, and their value is astonishing?" Zhenjin asked. ZD nodded. "The juice of these grasses is extremely rich, especially the roots, which are comparable to berries. But I still suggest that we sell mutton. This kind of grass is easy to imitate, whether it's a drool master or the Empire's Temple of Life. As long as they get a certain amount of grass, they have the ability to cultivate it in large quantities. Not to mention the existence of the Empire's Grand Duke Sin Su. The potion was made, but the actual effect still needed to be tested. Zhenjin certainly wouldn't be the first to take it. He first gathered a small group of people. When Huang Zhao heard this, he immediately shouted that he wanted to be the first to try. As a result, Lan Zhao scolded him, and Huang Zhao could only give up. As the younger brother, he didn't dare to rebel against his older brother. Thus, under the watchful eyes of everyone, Lan Zhao swallowed the first bottle of potion. Vomit, vomit, vomit. After Lan Zhao swallowed the potion, his whole face immediately turned blue. At the same time, he grabbed his neck with both hands, opened his mouth, widened his eyes, and vomited. But the uncomfortable thing was that he couldn't vomit anything. "Brother!" Huang Zhao cried out in alarm. The others were also somewhat surprised. "It doesn't matter, this is a normal reaction." ZD comforted everyone. As soon as her voice fell, Lan Zhao suddenly bent down, opened his mouth, and spat out a big mouthful of blood. The blood was red and blue, and there were several thumb-sized ice cubes in the middle. These ice cubes emitted a strong cold air, showing a strange blue-purple color. After spitting out these, Lan Zhao suddenly felt relaxed, and the strange blue color on his face quickly faded, returning to the original color of flesh and blood. ZD went up to check, smiled and said, "Very good, the ice magic in your body should have been spat out. The potion I made can absorb the ice magic in your body and then spit it out. As long as you don't continue to eat the goat meat, you won't be poisoned anymore." In order to verify this point, everyone deliberately accompanied Lan Zhao far away from the camp. Not only did they walk to the place where they were poisoned, but they also walked a bit further. Lan Zhao was in high spirits, and there was no abnormality. Everyone was overjoyed, and the second and third potions were made one after another. When it was Zhen Jin's turn to drink it, it was already the sixth potion. This was specially arranged by ZD. With the previous attempts, the potion's effect was fully proven, and she was relieved to let Zhen Jin take it. After Zhen Jin took the potion, the effect was no different from Lan Zhao's. He spat out a big mouthful of blood and ice cubes, and the ice magic in his body was pulled out. "This is..." But at this moment Zhen Jin's face changed. "Is there something wrong?" ZD hurriedly came forward with concern. "Nothing." Zhen Jin shook his head, but there was still a lingering shock in his heart. The moment he spat out the blood, he felt an inexplicable sense of emptiness. This sense of emptiness was too deep for him, and he even deliberately recalled it many times before. He was too familiar with it. Not long ago, when he killed the blade spiders, his hands turned into claws and disappeared, and he felt this sense of emptiness. "What's going on?" Zhen Jin was puzzled. Chapter 32. The night was quiet. It was dark inside the tent, isolating it from the cold outside. Zhen Jin lay on a mat made of dried leaves and hay, covered with a thin blanket. Previously, he and ZD had been living in the open, but now it was very comfortable and warm. Waves of weakness were still lingering in his body. This was the after-effect of drinking the potion. The comfortable sleeping environment and the exhaustion of his body did not make Zhen Jin fall asleep. The youth's eyes were wide open, his brows furrowed, recalling the emptiness he felt when he drank the potion and immediately spat out the blood. "That's right, it's almost the same feeling." Zhen Jin was very sure now. Back then, when he was dealing with the blade spider, he lacked the only dagger and was unable to cut the spider's silk. The situation was very dangerous, but at the moment of life and death, his hands suddenly turned into sharp claws and pierced into the spider's body. Zhen Jin fought back and killed the blade spider, turning the situation around. After that, his hands returned to their original state, and a deep, indescribable feeling of emptiness was transmitted from his body. These two feelings were exactly the same. The principle of the healing potion is to condense all the frost magic in my body into a ball and expel it. So, this feeling of emptiness should be the sudden huge consumption of magic in my body. Zhen Jin attached great importance to this discovery, because this mutated ability contained great value. In this current situation, if Zhen Jin was unable to use his qi, then it would be difficult for him to use his true strength. If he was in a desperate situation again, he could still turn his hands into sharp claws. No doubt he would have a powerful trump card. After all, in front of this trump card, a silver-level blade spider would be killed in one blow. According to my current train of thought, when ZD treated me, she actually inadvertently created a transformation potion? Because of this, I also mastered the transformation of a monkey-tail brown bear. The transformation potion was a kind of magic potion made by a powerful potion master, which could even temporarily turn a person into a giant dragon. For nearly 100 years, the transformation potion had been popular among the upper class of the human race. The key person was Duchess Amy. Not only was this Duchess powerful and influential, but she was also very fond of beauty. She had developed thousands of transformation potions herself. Unlike the previous potion masters, most of Duke Amy's potions were very basic. The effect of the medicine was very mild. After drinking it, people would often change their skin color, hair color, or make their nose bridge a little higher, their eyes a little bigger, etc. Amy's transformation potion had become a household name in the Qingming Empire's market. This business became the biggest source of profit for Amy Hill. Zhenjin carefully recalled. He charged to his death and killed the brown bear. He was seriously injured and on the verge of death. He had fainted a few times, and in between fainting, he had a blurry vision. He still remembered clearly that ZD had directly infused the bear's blood into his body. According to ZD's later explanation, she had no choice but to take the risk in a moment of desperation. Fortunately, she had succeeded in taking the risk. The bear's blood contains a lot of magic, just like when I eat goat meat. This magic was hidden in my body. After the transformation, this magic was consumed, causing me to feel a strong sense of emptiness. Of course, there was another possibility. It was still qi. This situation is quite complicated. At that moment of life and death, perhaps my potential was stimulated, and I instinctively used qi. This island prohibits the activation of low-level magic and qi, but the true limit of the prohibition has not been accurately calculated. Perhaps I was a gold-level cultivator. At the critical moment, I temporarily broke through the restriction and used gold-level qi. Gold-level qi is not the key. Most importantly, at that perilous moment, my bloodline was awakened. Once the bloodline awakened, a person's appearance would change. For example, a knight with dragon bloodline would grow dragon scales on the surface of his body. Or a warlock with a hydra bloodline, after the bloodline awakened, the human's round pupils would turn into vertical snake pupils. The Golden Marquis of the Qingming Empire was a sanctuary-level powerhouse. In recent years, he had been very active on the battlefield and was very famous. Every time he fought a bloody battle, qi would fill his body and stimulate the awakening of his bloodline, causing his body to be surrounded by tiny golden lightning. At the same time, his originally black hair would turn completely golden, and his hair would swell and form into blocks, like muscles filled with blood. Bloodline awakening was not common. Even among the powerhouses, only a portion of them had it. This was because only when the bloodline in the body had reached a very high concentration could there be such a possibility of awakening. If I was a gold-level cultivator, based on my current age, I would definitely be very talented. And this talent also means that I have a very thick bloodline. It is not strange for a bloodline awakening to happen to me. It's just that my bloodline, if traced back to its source, should be the Gold Queen Bee. After the bloodline awakening, I would have the characteristics of a queen bee, but why would it be a pair of sharp claws? Perhaps there are other bloodlines in my body? This was hard to say. Human nobles often had debauched private lives, and their bloodlines were often mixed. Not to mention that some bloodlines, if not stimulated, would remain dormant for life. Under the stimulation of death, I activated the gold qi, and a mysterious bloodline awakened in my body, turning my hands into sharp claws. But why did it have to be the same sharp claws as the monkey-tail brown bear? Is it really a coincidence? Therefore, after careful consideration, Zhen Jin felt that the possibility of the first transformation potion was the most likely. The possibility of the second bloodline awakening was not impossible, but the probability was relatively small. Then, this brought about a whole new problem. Is there still the magic of the monkey-tail brown bear in my body? This magic, is it still eroding me? The consequences of magic erosion were very serious. Different bloodlines could not coexist peacefully. If a human nobleman had two bloodlines in his body, basically, one high and one low, one strong and one weak, in the subsequent process of cultivation, the higher bloodline would become stronger and stronger, and eventually, the lower and weaker bloodline would be expelled. If both bloodlines were high and unwilling to give up, then it would be more troublesome. They would have to cultivate a specific qi technique and pay attention to the balance of these two bloodlines. The balance could be with one bloodline as the main and the other as a supplement. It could also be with the two bloodlines maintaining the same strength. Once the balance was broken, there would be a violent conflict between the bloodlines, and the extraordinary person's fate would be worrying, either injured or dead. Bloodline determined aptitude, and aptitude was the key to mastering power in the future. The human race's pursuit of bloodline was always persistent and crazy. Noblemen would think of ways to marry strong people with high bloodlines, and the aristocrats would marry each other. The aristocrats' private lives were chaotic. In addition to personal lust, it was to create outstanding descendants of the family. Among all the races, the human race was good at reproduction, much better than the elves and dwarves in this aspect. But among the descendants of the aristocrats, those with outstanding aptitude would always be a minority. Moreover, the more powerful an individual was, the more difficult it was to reproduce. The price of reproduction was also very high. In addition to reproduction, humans also used other crooked methods. For example, using magic, making potions, creating a living environment, trading with demons, and so on, forcibly planting high bloodlines in the body. It was not impossible to forcibly mix in high bloodlines, and there were even many methods that could temporarily succeed. But the results were often very tragic. First of all, the human body mutated, producing a terrifying distortion. This kind of distortion was not only physical, but also mental. Many examples showed symptoms of madness, ravings, confusion, dementia, and so on. Secondly, the stability of the original life was completely broken, and the lifespan was extremely reduced, and the survival time was not long. Finally, there was the death of the soul. Zhen Jin had never heard of using external forces to obtain a bloodline and completely succeed. Bloodlines were so precious and crucial. High-grade bloodlines brought about outstanding aptitude. Outstanding aptitude, after the brewing of time, formed powerful strength. And strength meant power. The reason why the human aristocrats were aristocrats and could stand above the vast majority of their own race was precisely because of such a solid foundation. Bloodlines were the cornerstone and pride of the aristocrats' existence. When ZD was treating me, she unintentionally created a transformation potion. This transformation potion can change my hands into the sharp claws of wild beasts. This means that external forces mixed the bloodline of the monkey-tailed brown bear in my body. This kind of low-grade bloodline has a terrible influence on my aristocratic bloodline. If this influence is relatively high, my cultivation aptitude will also decrease because of it. The transformation potion could not be abused. The consequences of abuse were serious and the price was disastrous. Whether I am now a silver or gold, I am still very young, and the road ahead of me is very long. This is just the starting point, not the end. If my future is dim because of this transformation potion, the gains will not make up for the losses. Bronze, iron, silver, gold. Above them, there were legends and saints. Above the saints, there were even stronger, who did not want to become a legend, a saint, and even stronger. Zhenjin did not want to see his growth hindered because of the monkey-tailed brown bear's blood, reducing his own potential and hope, and causing his originally bright future to become dim. The feeling of emptiness I felt was due to the huge consumption of magic in my body. Then, does that mean that the monkey-tailed brown bear's magic has been used up? My hands mutated once before, was it able to use up all of the corresponding magic? Now, are there any remnants in my body? After that, no matter how I tried, my hands could not mutate. Does this mean that the relevant magic in my body has been used up? Including this time, when I drank the potion, the foreign magic in my body was gathered into a ball, and then I vomited it out. The potion made by ZD targeted the magic of frost. Would it also be effective on the monkey-tailed brown bear's magic? Maybe I should reveal everything, and ask ZD to help me design a targeted vomit-inducing potion? Zhenjin's thoughts were complicated. He was weak after all, and not long after, he fell asleep in the tent. Where is this? Am I dreaming? After an unknown amount of time, he found himself in a spacious place. In front of him, there was a long wooden table, and on the long table was a bow and arrow. 100 meters away, there were 3 archery targets. The wooden table was crudely made, and the style was rough. The archery targets were made of straw, and there was a round white cloth hanging from the head. There were many layers of concentric circles drawn on the white cloth, and the circle in the center was specially filled with red fuel. This was a shooting range used for archery practice. There were only 2 people in the shooting range. One was Zhenjin, and the other was a middle-aged man with a straight body, a slender beard, and a slightly raised face with a touch of aristocratic pride. Zhenjin recognized this middle-aged man. This was his father, and also the current patriarch of the 100 Needles family. Because of the fragmented memories, Zhenjin lacked feelings for the middle-aged man in front of him, but the memories of the previous scenes surfaced, and he learned of the close relationship between the two of them. "Father, I'm here at your call." Zhenjin found himself speaking. The patriarch of the 100 Needles family nodded slightly. "It's been a few days since you came back from the capital. I'm here to test whether you've slackened your training in the capital. This time, let's compete in archery. If you can beat me, I'll give you the swift wasp." Hearing this, Zhenjin's eyes suddenly lit up. The swift wasp was a flying mount. Although it could only fly about 3 meters above the ground, it was still priceless and rarely circulated on the market. In the Empire, only a few nobles had mastered the technology of breeding swift wasps. The 100 Needles family was one of them. But the next moment, Zhenjin heard himself say in a sad and hesitant tone, "But father, your arm." Zhenjin immediately understood that this scene should have happened not long after the battle between the patriarch of the 100 Needles family and Qin Kuei. Zhenjin had more relevant memories, and he knew that his father, the patriarch of the 100 Needles family, was very powerful, but in the battle with Qin Kuei, he was careless and had one of his arms cut off. Indeed, with only one arm left, how could the patriarch of the 100 Needles family shoot an arrow? The patriarch of the 100 Needles family didn't care at all. "It doesn't matter. You shoot first." Zhenjin picked up the longbow, skillfully nocked an arrow, and shot the head of the target with a whoosh. Maybe Zhenjin was in low spirits at that time, so he didn't hit the bullseye. Zhenjin put the longbow on the long table. It was the turn of the patriarch of the 100 Needles family. The patriarch of the 100 Needles family smiled and unbuttoned his clothes, revealing a hidden pocket inside his clothes. There were fine needles and threads in the pocket, and 10 long needles were densely arranged. These needles were of the same length, each about the length of an adult's index finger. They seemed to be made of crystal, with a faint cloud-white color, and were not completely transparent. "Look carefully, my son." The patriarch of the 100 Needles family picked up one of the long white crystal needles with his index and middle fingers. The next moment, he activated his golden fighting spirit and infused it into the long white crystal needle. In an instant, the long white crystal needle flashed with a bright golden luster. The patriarch of the 100 Needles family faced the target and flicked his fingers gently. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound that pierced through the air rang in Pin Jin's ears. At the same time, he saw the long golden needle passing through the air, leaving a bright light. The light stretched straight and hit the target. With a loud bang, the entire target was blown to pieces. What's this? Zhenjin opened his mouth slightly, and his face was full of shock. The patriarch of the 100 Needles family explained with a smile. There are many kinds of fighting skills, and some of them are called secret skills. What you see now is the secret skill passed down from generation to generation in the 100 Needles family, Roaring Needles. Do you want to learn it? Yes. Father, please enlighten me, Zhen Jin shouted. His spirit was obviously uplifted, and his previous depression and gloom were swept away. The patriarch of the 100 Needles family immediately imparted the skill and handed a long white crystal needle to Zhen Jin. Zhen Jin took the opportunity to observe it carefully. He couldn't help but think to himself, this white crystal needle is unusual. It's at least a gold-level equipment. After that, Zhen Jin found that he had tried many times, but he didn't succeed. You've mastered the key, and you didn't make any mistakes in the process. It's not surprising that you didn't succeed. The middle-aged aristocrat explained, the reason for your failure is that you have too little fighting spirit. Using the secret skill Roaring Needles consumes a lot of your fighting spirit. Even if you have a gold-level cultivation, you can only launch 10 needles in a row. According to your current total fighting spirit, you should be able to launch 1 needle if you inject all your fighting spirit, the patriarch of the 100 Needles family immediately estimated. Zhen Jin smiled bitterly. Father, isn't it a little dangerous for me to use this secret skill? He could only launch 1 needle if he exhausted all his fighting spirit. If this needle didn't hit the target when fighting with an enemy, Zhen Jin would be in a very difficult situation without the support of fighting spirit. The patriarch of the 100 Needles family gradually withdrew his smile, and his expression turned serious. He stared at Zhen Jin and said meaningfully, "My son, the reality is always cruel. Whether it's fighting or other aspects, you'll always be exposed to risks. Many times you'll find that launching 1 needle with all your strength is the wisest choice. The feeling of emptiness and pain after exhausting all of the battle chi in the body is very unbearable. But sometimes we have to do this. Don't be afraid of risks, and don't be afraid of sacrifices." Chapter 33. Thud. With a soft sound, a dagger flew through the air, and the sharp tip of the dagger stabbed into the wooden stake. Zhen Jin slowly retracted his arm and looked at the wooden stakes in front of him thoughtfully. When he woke up this morning, he gave the order to collect many long-range weapons. Bows and crossbows were the most common ones. Other than that, there were also some that were specifically for throwing, such as flying axes and tridents. There were also some that could be thrown, such as short spears and daggers. Now, these weapons were all thrown out by him and accurately stabbed into wooden stakes of varying distances. Zhen Jin moved his fingers while looking at the results in front of him and secretly evaluated himself. Strictly speaking, daggers aren't specifically used for throwing. But I threw more than 10 daggers and didn't miss. Wherever you want to hit, you can hit it. Other than daggers, short spears, flying axes, and tridents are all the same. As for bows and crossbows, there was no need to even mention them. If I still had darts, I should be able to do the same. Darts were not common. In the eastern part of the Xingming continent, there was a unique Do Chi art that could make one as light as a swallow and use darts, flying daggers, and so on. Therefore, darts were more popular in the eastern part of the Xingming continent, but they were very rare in other places. The results have proven that last night wasn't a dream, but a part of my memory has been recovered. This kind of throwing result could not be achieved by the previous Jinjun. But after one night it was very easy for him to do it, as if it was instinctive. No, this should be the result of my hard work in the past. It's just that I haven't been able to use it. Last night's memory is the key. It's a pity that although I can recall the secret technique of rumbling needles, I can't use it. If I can use this secret technique, its power will be very impressive and will be a great threat to the ferocious monsters on the island. Zhen Jin sighed inwardly. Until now, he was still unable to use his douqi. For a douqi technique like roaring needles, the main premise was that he had to imbue his douqi into the specially made flying needles. Therefore, Zhen Jin couldn't use his fighting energy, so he couldn't bring out the true power of the sharp needles. But even so, with the emergence of this memory, Zhen Jin's strength still leaped a little. In the past, he wielded a long sword and fought valiantly in close combat. But now, because he had the ability to throw, he could attack everything within a few hundred steps with him as the center. As expected of the 100 Needles bloodline. In terms of accuracy, the 100 Needle bloodline was among the top 5 in the entire Xingming continent. Lord Zhen Jin, you are the hope of the 100 Needles clan. You will surely bring glory back to the clan. Zhen Jin, who was deep in thought, heard a familiar voice. He turned around and, as expected, saw Tsang Su. Tsang Su slowly walked over. When he saw the various throwing weapons on the wooden stakes, his face revealed a respectful expression. Zhen Jin shook his head slightly. He came here early in the morning to practice, not only to confirm that this was a memory, but also to use this opportunity to trigger the relevant memory and understand how to use douqi. But unfortunately, he didn't succeed. In fact, before this, he had asked his subordinates about their douqi arts and secretly tried to use it. But no matter how hard he tried, this island prohibited all low-level magic and douqi, so he couldn't sense anything and couldn't stimulate the douqi hidden in his body. He wouldn't confide in Tsang Su about this. Tell me, what's the current situation? Zhen Jin stood in place and watched Tsang Su walk in front of him, adjusting his breathing as he asked. Tsang Su obviously came to report the situation to him. Sir, no one died. Tsang Su's first sentence made Zhen Jin sigh in relief. Tsang Su continued, we are really lucky to have a pharmacist like ZD. These potions have benefited almost everyone. So far, more than half of the people have taken the potions. These people are very weak. Some are in a coma, some are feverish, and some are seriously ill. The potions had been made, and there were enough of them. But for safety and stability, under Tsang Su's arrangement, the exploration team members took the potions in batches. So far, there were still some people who hadn't taken the potions. Zhen Jin nodded slightly and asked the key question. Then, to what extent has the physical fitness of the first batch of people who took the potions declined? Tsang Su shook his head slightly. The situation is still developing, but as far as the current results are concerned, these people are very weak, and the extent of the decline in strength varies from person to person. Some people are milder, while others are more serious. Overall, the situation is quite good. At least there are no disabilities or cripples. At this point, Tsang Su's face darkened slightly. Sir, I think the danger of magic power erosion has been basically resolved, and it is no longer a threat to our entire team. But there is another problem in front of us. Food. Jin Jin's eyes flashed with a touch of understanding. Sir, Tsang Su bowed slightly, unable to hide his worry. We really don't have much food left. Zhen Jin nodded slightly. He had been paying attention to supplies for a long time, so he wasn't surprised. Back then, Tsang Su proposed to hunt a large number of goats in order to obtain mutton. Whether it was the exploration team or the large group of people who stayed on the beach, they all had a great need for food. The exploration team had originally brought plenty of food, but they had left the beach and entered the jungle for a long time. Most of the food had been consumed. Zhenjin and ZD originally had plenty of food on them, but this abundance was only for the two of them. Now that the number of people had soared, everyone's food immediately became scarce. Unless Zhenjin decided to abandon this group of people and preserve the food first. How long can it last? Zhenjin continued to ask. The scholar immediately replied, roughly calculated, it can last for 15 days. Half a month's time. Zhenjin nodded. He was satisfied with Sang Su's report. This is the role of an aide. Sang Su is a qualified aide. He can detect problems in advance and warn us. Many things seem very small and trivial. As a leader, it is difficult to take care of everything. At this time, someone needs to check and fill in the gap. 15 days seems to be a long time, but it is already on the alert line. A sense of urgency rose in Zhenjin's heart. He had experienced danger on this island for many days and deeply understood how difficult it was to obtain food on this island. Sang Su must have felt it too, because after he joined the exploration team, he had also experienced many hardships and dangers. Not once had he been able to harvest food on a large scale. His only chance was to hunt a flock of goat. In the end, there was a big problem with the mutton and it almost caused the entire exploration team to perish. Do you have any good ideas? Zhenjin thought for a while and asked Sang Su. Sang Su said in a low voice, I am ashamed that I can't do anything about this. But perhaps Lady ZD has some ideas? Hearing this, Zhenjin's heart suddenly moved slightly. He took a deep look at Sang Su. A thought rose in the young man's mind. Sang Su's words have a meaning. Could it be that he saw something? That's true. The secret of the grassroots is actually very difficult to hide. Maybe it can deceive others, but Sang Su had been paying attention to it all the time. He is very knowledgeable, so it is quite normal for him to see through this secret. After ZD found out that the goats were also victims and the real source was the seemingly ordinary grass, she told Zhenjin to keep it a secret. Zhenjin's thoughts kept turning. According to this fact, there is the simplest way to solve the food problem. That is to let ZD concoct more potions and feed them to the goat. After the goats spit out the chaos magic power, wouldn't the mutton be edible? Sang Su's suggestion just now seemed to point to this method, but he didn't say it clearly. After all, this unique grass root contains rich ice magic power. This is a superior resource and a secret that any force would want to carefully conceal. Old Mr. Sang Su is probably pretending to be confused. He really is someone who has served the nobles for most of his life. Thinking like this, Zhenjin couldn't help but admired Sang Su even more. What he admired most about Sang Su was that the old man knew how to restrain his cleverness and not let his wisdom offend others. He put forward his suggestions at the right time and with a sense of propriety, so as not to easily arouse the disgust of others. But at the same time, he still adhered to his principles. Sang Su knew that food was too important to the exploration team. At present, the team had plenty of water, and there was also a rare replenishment point nearby. Food was the key. Once there was a shortage of food, the energy that the human body could take in would decrease, and their physical strength would continue to decline. Their ability to resist external crises would also decrease. If there was no improvement, this vicious cycle would drag the entire team into the abyss of destruction. In fact, everyone knew about the food reserve. Once the reserves reached the warning line, the exploration team members would naturally feel psychological pressure. This psychological pressure would grow. It was very likely that there would be no need for any ferocious beasts to attack. In order to compete for the only food, the team members would have internal strife and competition, and the team would collapse and disintegrate. Previously, there were only two people, Zhenjin and ZD, who could meet the food needs. Now that there were more people, although it was more convenient in many aspects, it also brought a lot of pressure and trouble. Sang Su was worried that Zhenjin would be careless in this regard, and food was important, so he pointed out this problem. From his point of view, protecting the existence of the entire team was also protecting his own life and safety. Sang-soo was a scholar and did not cultivate battle chi. If he wanted to increase his chances of survival, he could only rely on others. At the same time, the more people there were in the team, the greater the value of his management and knowledge. Sang-soo knew how to survive. I really want to use such a talent for me. Zhenjin sighed to himself. Although Sang-soo was only a mortal, he was knowledgeable, knew his limits, and had extraordinary wisdom. He's not suitable to be the butler of a noble. He's not a transcendent being at all, so he can't control the situation. But as a consultant, he's completely qualified, even outstanding. Sang-soo left the family that he had served for many years because he wanted to write a book. This is the intention of a scholar, so it's understandable. For ordinary people, staying by the side of the original noble was definitely the best choice. Why risk your life for the sake of a book? Thinking of this, Zhenjin could not help but feel moved. Before this, I originally planned to use Sang-soo's intentions to slowly recruit him. But now that I think about it, the current situation might be a good opportunity to recruit him. Zhenjin thought about it from a different perspective, and his eyes slowly lit up. In the past, he wanted to slowly scheme, but in the future, when he came to White Sand City, he would not be the only holy knight. There would be at least 2 other people who would be competitors for the position of City Lord. Therefore, the best opportunity was not the future, but the present. On this dangerous strange island, Sang-soo had to rely on others to survive. So this island is actually my opportunity. For the first time, Zhenjin felt that this island was cute. Chapter 34. Zhenjin was not in a hurry to find ZD. He was followed by Sang-soo, and the 2 of them came to the camp together. There were many people lying here. They were all injured people who had just taken medicine recently and were weak all over. These people needed to be comforted. Sir. Greetings, sir. Seeing the arrival of the paladin Zhenjin, the injured people struggled to stand up and salute. Lie down. Zhenjin stretched out his palm and made a downward motion. Don't worry, everyone. The flag of the Empire is still flying, and the gods of the Holy Temple are watching you and me. This setback is nothing. As long as you don't lose your life, everything is possible. Follow me, I will take you out of the island and gain glory. After Zhenjin encouraged them, he walked out of the tent with Sang-soo. As long as you are here, the morale here will not collapse. You are the pillar in our hearts. Sang-soo sighed. Zhenjin smiled. Sang-soo said with emotion. It was not pure flattery. Zhenjin did have such an effect. This was a leader. This was one of the influences of the strong. Of course, the most important thing is my identity as a paladin. Zhenjin knew very well. In the hearts of the people of the Empire, the status of the paladins had always been quite high. Walking out of the camp, Zhenjin brought Sang-soo to a nearby hillside. Here, an extremely simple thatched hut was temporarily built. There was a fence around the thatched hut. In the fence, there were a few bone-horned goat. These goats used to be the leaders of the herd and had a bronze-level life aura. During the weak period of the exploration team's medicine, these goats would be isolated here. The person in charge of taking care of the goats was none other than Baiya. This young man did not suffer from the corrosion of the chaos magic power because he did not eat mutton and avoided a disaster. Because of this, he had a nickname, the Lucky Boy. Baiya the Lucky Boy was extremely busy these days. Not only did he have to take care of the sheep, but he also had to help the wounded. Many people were taken care of by him and received his kindness, which made him very popular. Among them, Huang Zhao had misunderstood Baiya before. After being taken care of by Baiya, Huang Zhao took the initiative to teach Baiya a battle chi technique. Noticing the arrival of Zhen Jin and Song Su, he hurriedly opened the gate and respectfully welcomed them in. "My lord, I'm sorry. I failed to live up to your expectations. I didn't do it." Bai Ye looked ashamed. Zhen Jin patted the young man's shoulder and comforted him. "It's okay, I know you've worked hard." Although in terms of age, Zhen Jin was younger than Bai Ye, but when Bai Ye heard this, the tension and worry on his face immediately dissipated. His shame turned into gratitude towards Zhen Jin. "Thank you, my lord, you're so magnanimous," Bai Ye said. Zhen Jin waved his hand and motioned for Bai Ye to leave. He originally ordered Bai Ye to train these goats with the intention of taming them as mounts. If this plan succeeded, it would be of great help to Zhen Jin now and even in the future. Zhen Jin had always been thinking about the goat cavalry. The reason why this task was given to Bai Ye was because he was alive and kicking and had not been corroded by the magic power. The second reason was that he was the son of a hunter and had dealt with many wild beasts. But now it seemed that Bai Ye could not tame these goats. Zhen Jin was not disappointed. He had little hope to begin with. Usually, this kind of thing was done by beast tamers or drool. Zhen Jin also knew that his idea was unrealistic to count on the son of a hunter, and an ordinary young man at that. "My lord, I'll take my leave." Bai Ye retreated. Soon, only Zhen Jin and Song Su were left in the fence. Zhen Jin then said, "Regarding the problem of food shortage, I already have a solution. That is to make a large amount of medicine and let the goats consume it. It will expel the magic power in their bodies and purify all the meat." Song Su heard this and hesitated for a moment before choosing his words carefully. "My lord, I'm afraid this method won't work. We can remove the magic power in our bodies because we are only corroded. However, these goats are the source of the magic power itself. The magic power is a part of their life, like their hands and feet or their internal organs. If we give the goats the medicine, although it will expel a large amount of the magic power in their bodies, there will always be some residual magic power that cannot be completely removed. At the same time, these goats will also suffer heavy injuries, far more serious than us. Death on the spot is the most likely outcome." Zhen Jin laughed and looked deeply at Song Su. "These goats are actually the same as us, they are all victims. The real source of the magic power is not them, but the seemingly ordinary grass growing nearby." Zhen Jin was so frank that Song Su was stunned on the spot. The old scholar looked at Zhen Jin and their eyes met in midair. The old scholar blinked and suddenly understood the meaning of Zhen Jin's words. Zhen Jin continued, "Could it be that Mr. Song Su is not aware of this secret?" Song Su's heart trembled slightly. Zhen Jin's constant pressure gave him an illusion that he was facing a sharp swordsman with an endless offensive. The old scholar's face flashed with a touch of hesitation, and his eyes flickered as he replied, "This one is stupid and did not notice this secret." Zhen Jin stared at Song Su for a while, and seeing that the latter did not have any follow-up reaction, a feeling of disappointment rose in his heart. Jin Jin replied with a faint He slowly turned around and strode towards the gate. Song Su followed closely behind. When Zhen Jin was about to open the gate, Song Su suddenly said, "Lord Zhen Jin, your frankness and foresight are admirable. You have the foresight of an excellent leader. Although you are now in a difficult situation, you are still trying to form a cavalry. Indeed, cavalry is very useful, both for offense and defense. With an excellent cavalry in hand, you will often be able to seize the initiative. However, in this one's opinion, these goats are not your best choice. You have a better choice." "Oh!" Zhen Jin put one hand on the gate, slowly turned around, and looked back at Song Su. "Then let me listen to Mr. Song Su's opinion. My lord, although these goats have a high level of life, they are not natural products, hiding a huge hidden danger. They cannot coordinate their magic. Even if they form a cavalry, the upper limit is very low. In addition, my lord will be in charge of White Sand City in the future. The surrounding terrain of White Sand City is flat, and there is a vast forest in the direction of the wilderness. There are no hills, so it is not suitable for the goat cavalry to display their power. Sang Su spoke with assurance. Zhen Jin's face was expressionless, but in his heart, he agreed with Sang Su's words. Zhen Jin was clear about these problems. But the key was, other than forming the goat cavalry, what else could he form? Zhen Jin was now poor. Although he was a dignified temple knight, even his subordinates were only recently recruited. Moreover, once these people left this island in the future, whether they were willing to continue following Zhen Jin was another matter. Sang Su suddenly asked, "How much do you know about the exploding horse, my lord? It sounds familiar." Zhen Jin frowned slightly, thought for a moment and suddenly said, "Duke Hung Lu." When Duke Hung Lu was young, he was a famous hedonistic son. His parents died in his early years, and he was deeply doted on by his ancestors. He indulged in sensual pleasures, but his strength was not good. However, the eastern nobles rebelled, and his ancestors were ambushed and killed on the battlefield. As a result, Hung Lu rose to the position and became the patriarch. Before he could react, the allied army of the nobles had already launched a mighty attack. Hung Lu did not even have time to grieve. Under the support of the family knights, he became the commander and led the army to resist the allied army. The two armies fought. The knights of the Hung Lu family fought bravely to protect their home, but they were powerless. They were at a disadvantage, and fell into a predicament. Seeing that the situation was about to collapse, the timid Hung Lu decided to secretly escape to save his life. But in his panic, he did not recognize the horse clearly and mistakenly got on an exploding horse. The exploding horse was impulsive and even crazy. Once provoked, it would fight back with all its might, even if it lost its life. As Hung Lu urged his horse to escape, a bullet accidentally hit the butt of his mount. The exploding horse was furious. It did not care about Hung Li's shouts and pulled reins. It turned around and charged into the bitter battlefield where the army was entangled. The originally low morale of the family army suddenly saw the current Duke Hung Li's one-man charge. They were immediately infected by his spirit and roared. Their morale soared and they launched a fierce counterattack without regard for their lives. The allied army was caught off guard and their front line collapsed, becoming the defeated side. Hung Lu won a crucial victory by accident and protected his family's territory. This story about him was revealed 6 years later when he was drunk. As a result, it was widely known throughout the world. Sang Su nodded. It is the kind of horse that Duke Hung Lu rode in the past. I know a method to nurture exploding horse cavalry. When Zhen Jin heard this, he could not help but reveal a shocked expression. Are you sure? The exploding horse had a wild temperament and would easily fall into a state of anger. Just the slightest provocation would cause it to attack crazily. But apart from that, the exploding horse's body was very sturdy. It was very tall and its head was about a meter taller than most warhorses. Its hooves were thicker and harder than most warhorses, as if they were made of steel. Its explosive power was very strong. Once it started running, it would only take a few breaths to reach its fastest speed. Not only was it good for short distances, it also had considerable stamina for long-distance attack. Zhen Jin was a temple knight. Although his memories were incomplete, he had common sense. He deeply understood how important a good mount was to a knight and how much it would increase their fighting strength. The height of the exploding horse allowed a knight to fight from a high vantage point. On the battlefield, a slight advantage could lead to the difference between life and death. The height advantage brought by the exploding horse was more than just a slight advantage. The hooves of the exploding horse were also very powerful weapons. Excellent cavalry could make the warhorse stand up and use its front hooves to kick the enemy. With a stomp of the exploding horse's hooves, it could kick through a normal iron shield. Not to mention the muscles all over the exploding horse's body, bringing about a terrifying collision force. Such excellent qualities made many nobles or leaders of forces try to form exploding cavalry. However, the performance of this kind of cavalry on the battlefield had always been terrible. This was because the cavalry had no way to control these exploding horses. Especially when these exploding horses were provoked, they would ignore the restraints of the cavalry and charge towards the enemy with all their might. The exploding cavalry was too easy to mobilize. With a little provocation, the cavalry would rush in front of them and enter the range of the mages. Under the bombardment of magic, the exploding horse led the cavalry to their deaths without any fear. If they encountered a slightly more cunning enemy leader, this cavalry would be mobilized to attack their own front line and become a chess piece in the hands of the enemy. The exploding horse had many advantages, but there was a huge flaw, causing the exploding cavalry to gradually become a laughing stock. But now, Sang Su proposed to Zhen Jin to form the exploding cavalry. Zhen Jin stared at Sang Su with a sharp gaze. Although they had only known each other for a short period of time, he did not believe that Sang Su was a person who did not know his limit. Sure enough, Sang Su added in the next moment, I have a way to allow the cavalry to control the irritable exploding horse. The reason why the exploding horse can't form a cavalry is because their temperament is too explosive. But with this method, we can make up for this flaw. It's just that the current Do Chi art is still in its infancy and is not mature, let alone perfect. If you don't mind, I am willing to offer it to you with both hands. Zhen Jin withdrew his gaze and nodded. Mr. Sang Su, I will remember your contribution. The relationship between the cavalry and their mounts was not just a simple riding relationship. In addition to spending time with their mounts and training together to cultivate tacit understanding, the cavalry would also use Do Chi to instill it into their mounts. The Do Chi shuttled through the body of the mount, causing it to move faster, have stronger defense, recover faster, have greater strength, and so on. When the cavalry charged, the Do Chi would cause the cavalry and their mounts to be more closely connected, thus forming a whole. According to Sang Su, he had mastered a Do Chi art that had just been created. Using this Do Chi, the cavalry could effectively control the exploding horse and would not easily cause the latter to go crazy. The value of this Do Chi art was, of course, very high. Sang Su continued, Lord Zhen Jin, although these goats have a strong life force, they are still monsters in the end. They cannot automatically coordinate their magic and make the magic in their bodies balanced and stable. This also means that the cavalry cannot instill Do Chi into the goats' bodies. Even if they become cavalry, they do not have much potential, and there are many hidden dangers. It's better to use drugs to remove the chaotic magic in their bodies, than directly kill them to obtain a large amount of food and solve the problem in front of us. Although the processed mutton might still have magic left, there was still a risk. But in the current situation, what else could the entire exploration team ask for? P.S. I recommend a good book, Legendary Mechanic. The mechanical setting is novel, and the atmosphere is relaxed and happy. Han Shao, Galaxy's hardcore leveler, was thrown into the transmigration army by a mysterious force from the east, Zhua, brought along with the player interface to become an NPC, returned to the open beta of Galaxy, and resolutely chose the mechanic class, which was the most difficult class. Battleships lined up and traversed the sea of stars, star mechas were like dragons, psionic cannons could destroy the world, and an endless mechanical army quietly waited in the portable warehouse. One person was an army. Chapter 35. Food was very important. A lack of food would cause the entire exploration team to fall into a desperate situation. Even just the pressure of a lack of food could cause the entire team to panic and fall into chaos. After discussing with Sang Su, Zhen Jin went to ZD's tent alone. The size of this tent was second only to Zhen Jin's. There were no guards outside the tent. Zhenjin originally wanted to arrange some people for ZD, but ZD made it clear that she did not need them. She had her own defensive measures. ZD had already gone to bed. The amount of work required to make medicine for the entire team was too much. The process was also very troublesome, and she was exhausted. Zhenjin paced outside the tent. Although the problem was serious, Zhenjin did not want to disturb ZD. Just let her rest. While Zhenjin was thinking, ZD, who was sleeping soundly in the dim tent, gently twitched her nose and then slowly opened her eyes. "Is it, sir?" ZD's voice came from the tent. Zhenjin had just turned around and was about to leave when he heard this voice. He immediately turned around. "It's me. There are some things I need to discuss with you." Rustling sounds came from the tent. Soon, Zhenjin saw that ZD was already dressed neatly. She opened the tent curtain and personally welcomed him. "Sir, please come in." ZD welcomed Zhenjin into the tent. Zhenjin directly stated his intentions. ZD shook her head. "I'm very sorry. This time, I will have to disappoint you. Although Sir's method is feasible, I need a key material to make the medicine. And I have almost used up all of this material. I only have a little left in case of any accident." "What kind of material is this? Can you find it here?" Zhenjin was unwilling to give up. ZD shook her head with a distressed expression. "Perhaps this material grows somewhere on this island, but I don't have any clues. Moreover, even if we have such materials and make enough medicine, it's not worth it to use it on the sheep. Because if we do that, we will expose the secret of the grass. With the help of the potion, the flock of sheep would be cleansed of the chaos mana within their bodies, and others would understand that the flock of sheep was also a victim. The real source of magic, the green grass, was exposed. The grass here was a magic plant, and after plucking it, it was far easier to transport than mutton. Zhenjin, I've already told this secret to Tsang-Su. ZD was stunned for a moment before she understood. My lord, you did the right thing. Tsang-Su is indeed a rare talent. He might have discovered this secret long ago, but he didn't reveal it. This proves that he is quite intelligent. Or perhaps, he didn't discover this secret, but since you've told him such an important secret, he must have understood your sincerity in treating him as one of your own. Congratulations, sir, for recruiting such an excellent consultant. Zhenjin, however, shook his head and told ZD what happened next. ZD was quite surprised. There's actually such a battle energy technique? She immediately frowned and said with a worried tone, My lord, if such a battle energy technique is given away so easily, I'm afraid its value won't be too high. Mr. Tsang-Su himself is a scholar, not a beast tamer. The most important thing is that he doesn't have extraordinary power. If this battle energy technique is very valuable, he can definitely exchange it with other nobles for more benefits. Zhenjin, however, had a different opinion. Tsang-Su doesn't seem like a person who doesn't know the importance of things. He does things with a sense of propriety. He understands the value of these grasses, so the battle energy technique he gave out is at least of the same value. This is the bargaining chip he used to retain his freedom and refuse my offer. But this way, he's more important to me. At this point, Zhenjin smiled slightly. Zhenjin asked ZD about the problem of food shortage. ZD didn't have any good ideas. She only said, This island is very large and full of danger, but it also contains rich resources. We can only look around as we go. Perhaps we can find a better source of food than a flock of sheep. Moreover, before looking for Sir, we set up a few camps along the way and stored some supplies in the camp. If we can find our way here and obtain these supplies, we can also alleviate the food shortage problem. Zhenjin nodded and prepared to leave with a slight disappointment. Just as he raised the curtain, Zhenjin's face flashed with a hint of hesitation. But in the end, he turned his head and asked, ZD, do you still have the blood of the brown bear from before? Although he asked this, Zhenjin didn't have much hope. The brown bear's blood contained magic and was a magic material, but the magic in the blood would quickly dissipate with time. It wasn't easy to preserve it, and the cost of preserving it was very high. But Zidi's response surprised Zhenjin. She really did have some brown bear's blood. "Give it to me," Zhenjin said. Zidi didn't ask anything. She directly opened the small leather bag at her waist and handed a few glass bottles to Zhenjin. Zhenjin held the reagent bottle containing the brown bear's blood and left Zidi's tent. He was the strongest in the whole team. Now that there was a shortage of food, almost everyone else would be weakened by taking potions. Zhenjin hadn't been able to use his qi. In this case, the ability to mutate his hands into sharp claws became Zhenjin's strongest move. According to my previous guess, if I drink the brown bear's blood, I can replenish the corresponding magic in my body. It's very likely to reproduce the original mutation. Holding the glass bottle in his hand, Zhenjin thought to himself. His eyes were firm, and he said to himself, "Of course, I won't drink this blood unless it's absolutely necessary." The chaotic foreign magic would erode his body and reduce his potential. But as the 100 Needles patriarch said in his memory, sometimes you can't be afraid of risks, and you can't be afraid of sacrifices. Early morning. White mist lingered between the towering trees. Green moss and various bright-colored mushrooms adorned the woodland. An orange fawn was looking for food in the forest. It saw a low bush and was about to approach it. Suddenly, a series of hurried sounds came from the bush. Squeak, 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 the fawn was frightened. It turned around like lightning and quickly left. After a few breaths, the squeaking sounds were getting closer and closer, mixed with people's shouts. "Chase! Don't let these flying squirrels escape. Use the crossbow quickly." The sound was getting louder and louder. Then 3 flying squirrels squeaked and jumped directly into the bushes to escape. The pursuers behind them were hindered by the bushes and had to slow down. They watched the flying squirrels disappear into the forest. What a pity! Alas, we still didn't catch up. The leaders of the pursuers were the 2 brothers, Lan Zhao and Huang Zhao. Huang Zhao was unwilling to give up and wanted to chase, but he was stopped by Lan Zhao. "Have you forgotten Lord Zhenjin's order? Don't get separated from the main group. We're already far away from Lord Zhenjin. I just want to get more food. These flying squirrels are very big, their meat is safe, and they're very fat." Huang Zhao sighed. The exploration team didn't have much food left. This invisible pressure was already weighing on everyone's heart. But thinking of Zhenjin's order, Huang Zhao could only grit his teeth and give up. When the pursuers returned to the team, they saw that Bai Ye and the others had already begun to deal with the flying squirrels' corpses on the spot. They skinned, cut, cleaned, and then smoked them. More than 10 days had passed. ZD had made enough potions to solve the magic corrosion in the bodies of the exploration team members. After resting on the spot for a few days, Zhenjin led the group and set off. This team had gone through the crisis of the poison, and almost everyone's quality and combat strength had declined. However, they had gone through the same difficulties together, so they were closer and had a tacit understanding. In the following journey, they encountered several crises one after another. Every time, Jin Zhen stepped forward bravely and repelled the invading demonic beasts with a united will. "I'm sorry, Lord Zhenjin. We only killed 2 flying squirrels." Huang Zhao walked in front of Zhenjin and reported in shame. Zhenjin nodded and ordered, "Leave these to Bai Ye and the others." Not everyone was proficient in dealing with the corpses of magical beasts. Bai Ye, on the other hand, was the son of a hunter. He had received this kind of training since he was young and was very familiar with it. The mutton poisoning incident made this young man stand out. He had the nickname of Lucky Boy. Almost the entire exploration team had been taken care of by him. Because he was diligent, enthusiastic, and pure, he was very popular. Huang Zhao carried the 2 flying squirrels and walked to Bai Yu's side. Bai Yu was dealing with the flying squirrels. The flying squirrels under his knife had been skinned and its internal organs cleaned. Bai Yu was trying to cut off the flying squirrels' necks with his knife. After several slashes, the bones in the necks were still not completely broken. "Hey, lucky boy, use this." Huang Zhao smiled and handed Bai Yu a knife. One could tell at a glance that this knife was crudely made. The handle was only slightly polished wood. The blade was inserted into the handle and wrapped with hemp rope and other things as much as possible to fix it. However, the blade was ferocious and flashed with a sharp cold light. It was like steel but not steel, like iron but not iron. It was one of the limbs of the blade spider. Of course, this weapon belonged to Zhen Jin. However, after the poisoning incident, the entire exploration team's combat strength had declined. In order to increase his combat strength as much as possible, Zhen Jin selectively lent some of the blade weapons to his subordinate. Bai Yu took the knife. It was his first time touching it. His first impression was that it was light and not as heavy as he had imagined. Bai Yu aimed at the flying squirrel's neck and slashed down. Immediately, a cold light flashed past his eyes, and the stubborn flying squirrel's bones were broken into 2. Bai Yu immediately revealed a look of shock. Previously, he had cut the bones as if he was cutting iron. After several slashes, his hands had gone numb and he had not succeeded. Now that he used this knife, he felt as if he was cutting a piece of bread. It was too easy. Amazing! Bai Yu looked at the knife and praised from the bottom of his heart. Of course. After all, this is a silver-level magical beast. Huang Zhao smiled. Bai Yu shook his head. "No, I mean Lord Zhen Jin. That silver-level blade spider must be very terrifying." But Sir defeated it, as expected of a holy knight. As Bai Yu spoke, the admiration and respect in his heart were revealed on his face. Huang Zhao chuckled and agreed. "Yes, to be able to meet Lord Zhen Jin is really our fortune. Not to mention other things, just the group of flying squirrels we encountered just now, Lord Zhen Jin's dagger was 100% hit. Most of the flying squirrels were killed by Sir. Wait, with this knife, I can deal with the corpse of the flying squirrel leader." Bai Yu thought of something and ran to another place with a face full of excitement. The corpse of the flying squirrel leader emitted a bronze-level life aura. However, this aura was rapidly weakening and would completely disappear in less than half a day. There was a dagger in the eye socket of the flying squirrel leader. This was a fatal wound, and it was the work of Zhen Jin. Bai Yu held the spider blade tightly and slowly aimed it at the right place. He used force to cut and quickly peeled off the flying squirrel's fur. The skin of the flying squirrel leader was very tough. Ordinary iron swords could not cut it open. But under the spider blade, everything was easily solved. Bai Yu was cutting open the abdomen of the flying squirrel leader when his hand suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Huang Zhao asked. Bai Yu said uncertainly, "The meat of this flying squirrel leader seems different from the other flying squirrels." Huang Zhao glanced at it. "There's no difference." "No." Bai Yu's face was serious. He first returned the knife to Huang Zhao, then squatted on the ground and pressed on it. He then searched around the internal organs and bones of the flying squirrel. After that, Bai Yu's tone became more certain than before. "There are indeed many minute differences. I should bring this to Sir Tsang-Su first." "That's a good idea," Huang Zhao agreed. Chapter 36. Tsang-Su, the old scholar, was very knowledgeable and had a broad vision. He could often see many things from the corpses of magical beasts. Before Zhen Jin took over the leadership of the expedition, Tsang-Su had relied on this to provide great help to the expedition. Tsang-Su had already seen the corpses of the ordinary flying squirrels, but he had specially instructed them to report to him immediately if they discovered anything unusual after dissecting the leader of the flying squirrels. "My lord, Bai Ye soon brought the corpse of the leader of the flying squirrels to Tsang Su. "Oh, it's Bai Ye," Tsang Su nodded, and then his gaze shifted to the corpse of the leader of the flying squirrels that Bai Ye was carrying. "My lord, please take a look. Maybe I'm too nervous, but there's something different about it." Bai Ye showed the corpse of the leader of the flying squirrels to Tsang Su for a closer look. Tsang Su observed for a moment, and his expression gradually became serious. "Bai Ye, you've done well," Tsang Su praised, reaching out to lift the corpse of the leader of the flying squirrels. Although he had lifted it, the old scholar soon sighed and put it back on the ground. The old scholar's body was weak to begin with, and he had also suffered from the corrosion of the magic power. Although the poison had been neutralized, his body was still greatly damaged. "Take it and report to the Lord Zhenjin with me," Tsang Su said to Bai Ye. "Yes, my lord." Bai Ye immediately accepted the order. In the tent, Zhenjin was discussing the matter of the crossbow with ZD. Because of the corrosion of the magic power, the actual combat power of the entire expedition has decreased significantly. With no outsiders present, Zhenjin appeared to be very worried. It was already quite difficult to explore this island in the first place. Now, the risk we have to take is even greater. ZD muttered, "Lord Zhenjin, we've already done our best. For the time being, this is the best the expedition can do. That is, unless you use a mid-grade or high-grade magic potion, or the corresponding magic, divine arts, and so on. However, in the current situation, we are unable to produce any high-grade magical potions. And I don't approve of it either. Because it's not worth it. Regardless of whether it's a mid-grade or high-grade magic potion or equivalent magic or divine arts, the cost is very high. Even if there are 2 bronze-ranked elites among them, it's not worth it just to save these ordinary people." After pausing for a moment, Purple Stem added, "In fact, magic power erosion has many side effects. For example, there are all kinds of strange and even incurable chronic diseases, as well as reduced lifespan and so on." Zhenjin sighed. "Let's not think about that for now. Right now, I just want to replenish my combat strength. Do you think we can make crossbows?" In the past few days, Zhenjin had fully experienced the benefits of long-range attack. For example, the leader of the flying squirrels not long ago was a bronze-level magical beast. But under the dagger that Zhenjin threw out, it was killed in one blow. With the death of the leader of the flying squirrels, the swarm of flying squirrels that came attacking immediately fell into chaos. Thus, the expedition seized the opportunity and obtained a great victory with no casualties. ZD considered her tone and said seriously, "Sir, your thinking is very correct. As long as we increase our long-range power, we can replenish our combat strength to a large extent and also conserve our strength and reduce the possible casualties. However, I'm afraid we are still unable to make it at the moment. First, we don't have a crossbow craftsman. The structure of a crossbow is very simple, but to make it, it requires mature skills. We are all amateurs. Second, we don't have a blacksmith. A truly powerful crossbow uses steel plates as the crossbow arm, and the weight of the pulled string will be very high. At the same time, the structure of the crossbow mechanism is very delicate and requires metal springs. These all require blacksmiths to make. Excellent crossbows also have mechanical devices to assist in pulling the string. Even the Empire is unable to mass-produce such devices. Every year, they purchase them on a large scale from the goblins of the lava continent. Scholars were not necessarily magicians, but every magician was a scholar. ZD was the current president of the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce, and the arms business was usually the most profitable business. Thus, she was very familiar with crossbows. However, Zhenjin did not give up so easily. He still insisted, "I don't plan to use steel plates as crossbow arms. I only want wooden planks. We can tear the dried bark and make hemp rope. This way, we will have a bowstring. Actually, we still have a lot of magical beast tendons." Although the weight of the crossbow made this way will be much lower, it will be easier to wind. It can be done with just manpower. The only thing that can be a hindrance is the crossbow mechanism. The mechanism of the crossbow is very delicate and requires specific metal parts to be made. The most difficult part is still the springs. ZD, you are right. We don't have a blacksmith. However, we have very few people and do not need a blacksmith to mass produce. I only need you to use a potion to corrode the specific metal parts and springs. Zhenjin was also very familiar with crossbows. Although he did not recover the relevant memories, he had a lot of common sense. In fact, the temple knights were equipped with crossbows. These crossbows were small in size and were specifically used by the knights on horseback. ZD sighed, I'm sorry, sir. I don't have any potion that can corrode specific metal parts. I don't have such a special potion with me. However, if I gather the necessary materials, I can still make it on the spot. However, magical beasts with corrosive acid are not easy to deal with. It is very likely to cause a lot of casualties to the entire team. There is also one more thing that I want to remind you to pay more attention to. At this point, ZD subconsciously lowered her voice. If Sir's plan is carried out smoothly and almost everyone in the team has a crossbow, then the team will not be easy to control and will become very dangerous. Zhen Jin's pupils shrank. ZD's warning was very correct. Zhen Jin immediately recalled the scene of Huang Zhao escaping. You can't overestimate people, but you can't underestimate them either. Zhen Jin muttered in his heart. People's hearts were unpredictable. In the face of his savior, Huang Zhao escaped with the dagger, whether it was intentional or not. And on this island danger lurked everywhere. What kind of extreme situation would happen in the future? Now it seemed that these people supported Zhen Jin as their leader. But what if something extreme happened? For example, if everyone fled together under the pursuit of magical beasts, in order to escape, would someone use the crossbow in their hand to shoot their companions so that they could use their companions as bait to slow down the pursuit of the magical beasts? Especially in this kind of environment, low-level magic and do-chi could not be used. Whether it was Zhen Jin or ZD, they were both very weak. A sharp sword or a flying arrow could kill them both. People had fatal weaknesses. These members of the exploration team were not soldiers of the 100 Needles family. And the cultivation of loyalty often took time. Zhen Jin was not a person who did not listen to advice. If the crossbow is not enough, then we can only try to use a bow. A longbow is definitely not enough. This kind of bow is very inconvenient in the dense forest, and the requirements for archers are also very high. A short bow can be made, it is more convenient to make than a crossbow. But it also needs some training. The first thing to do in long-range attacks was to be accurate. But Zhen Jin suddenly grasped the long-range attack ability because of the emergence of memories, which was difficult to replicate. The members of the exploration team could not master the bow and arrow, except for Baiya. He was the son of a hunter, and using the bow and arrow was one of his means of making a living. If there were enough people, Zhen Jin could choose an expert archer and form a special archer team. But now there was a serious shortage of archers. The main purpose of forming a bow and arrow team was to protect these people and minimize casualties as much as possible. Wood is everywhere here, it is not difficult to make a short bow. If one person's accuracy is not enough, the team can shoot together to form a barrage to make up for the lack. We still have to do assault training, otherwise we can't even form a barrage of arrows. But to train, we need enough food. Zhen Jin began to feel a faint headache. Drawing the bowstring consumed a lot of energy, and the higher the weight of the bow, the more so. Many crossbows required mechanical devices, otherwise it would be impossible to draw the bowstring by relying on manpower alone. When shooting an arrow, one needed to aim, and it required a period of time to maintain the bow in a strongly bent state, which also consumed a lot of energy. The greater the energy consumption, the greater the demand for food. Without food to supplement, rashly training was definitely asking for trouble. Therefore, the problem came down to food. And the shortage of food was already the most serious problem at the moment. While Zhen Jin was distressed, Sang Su and Bai Ye asked for an audience. The two of them brought the body of the flying squirrel leader. "We have some unexpected discoveries, sir." Sang Su's tone was serious. Zhen Jin's gaze subconsciously turned to the body of the flying squirrel leader. "Did you find a magic crystal?" "No." Sang Su gestured to Bai Ye. After seeing Zhen Jin nod, Bai Ye placed the body of the flying squirrel leader on the table. Sang Su then instructed Bai Ye to pry open the wound on the body of the flying squirrel leader, revealing the vivid muscle texture. "Lord Zhen Jin, Lady ZD, please look here." Sang Su pointed at the muscle texture. ZD took a look and immediately frowned slightly. It is indeed a little different from ordinary magical beasts. Zhen Jin had also noticed that the muscles of magical beasts were usually bundled together as a whole. However, the muscles of the flying squirrel leader were divided into many fine muscle sheets. The muscle sheets were closely arranged like fish scales and were very neat. "Look here." Sang Su continued to show the internal organs of the flying squirrel leader. Zhen Jin and ZD also noticed that the surface of the internal organs was covered with a layer of white, fascia-like material that was relatively thick. ZD was puzzled. This is indeed different from ordinary magical beasts. But what does this different structure mean? Although ZD was a magus, she was not as knowledgeable as Sang Su in this aspect. Zhen Jin's common sense did not allow him to understand the old scholar's intentions. Sang Su saw the puzzled expressions on their faces and explained, "I strongly suspect that this flying squirrel leader can release strong electric currents." "Why do you say that?" Zhen Jin was puzzled. "There are rats that can release electric currents?" Bai Ye's mouth was agape. Sang Su continued to explain, "There is a special type of fish that lives and breeds at the bottom of the sea or in large rivers. People call them electric eels. The body structure of this fish is very similar to that of the flying squirrel leader. When they want to release an electric current, all the muscles in their body will move rhythmically and release a terrifying electric shock that can kill an elephant instantly. However, they also have insulating fascias in their bodies that can protect themselves from electric shock. Then why didn't this flying squirrel leader release electric shocks earlier?" Bai Ye asked. Sang Su shook his head slightly. "This electric shock is not magic. It comes from the unique structure of life. Magic is a magus using his own spirit and using the elements to create something out of nothing. The electric eel is because of its unique organ structure. It is like being able to make sounds after having a throat and being able to fly after having wings. Electric eels can at most produce electric currents, but they can't control the direction of the currents. However, electric eels live in water. Once a strong electric current is produced, the underwater life forms near it will suffer terrifying electric shock. For the flying squirrel leader, even if it produces electric currents, it has to look at its surroundings. Trees, earth, and air are often strong obstacles to electric current. Therefore, only when the flying squirrel leader comes into contact with an enemy will its electric shock ability be exposed. However, because the dagger that Lord Zhen Jin threw out earlier killed it in midair, this ability was temporarily concealed. "I see." Bai Ye was enlightened. ZD narrowed her eyes slightly. "Therefore, if we have to face these flying squirrel leaders in the future, iron armor will be their weakness. It's best to wear thick leather armor." Sang Su shook his head. "Leather armor can't provide enough protection. Their faces are usually exposed. Also, flying squirrels have very sharp claws and teeth. They can release electricity after tearing through leather armor." Zhen Jin nodded. "Therefore, the best way to deal with these flying squirrel leaders is to attack them from afar. However, we don't have enough archers. Although Zhenjin could throw accurately, he couldn't kill them in one blow so smoothly every time. He wasn't someone's babysitter, and subordinates weren't meant to be protected. "Sir, Lan Zhao is here to report to you." At this moment, a voice came from outside the tent. Lan Zhao was a bronze-ranked elite, so Zhenjin had sent him to scout the surroundings. Zhenjin called Lan Zhao into the tent and found that the latter was full of joy. "Sir, good news. I found a gathering place of flying squirrels not far ahead. These flying squirrels have dug holes in the trunks of large trees to build nests. I did a rough count and found that there are many holes in the trees. This group of flying squirrels is very large, with close to 1,000 of them. If we take them down, we can greatly replenish our food supply." Sang Su muttered, "It seems that these flying squirrels' social nature hasn't changed." Zhenjin raised his eyebrows slightly and subconsciously looked at ZD. ZD knew what Zhenjin meant and immediately said, "I've already tested it. There's no problem with the meat of ordinary flying squirrels. Of course, the meat of the leader of the flying squirrels is definitely not to be eaten carelessly." Baya exclaimed, "Hunting such a large group of flying squirrels is very dangerous." Lan Zhao glared at Baya, then looked at Zhenjin and volunteered to take the lead in attacking the flying squirrels. Sang Su shook his head. "Lan Zhao, you're underestimating these flying squirrels. A bronze-ranked flying squirrel leader can release electric shock. With such a large group, it's very likely that they have a dark iron-ranked flying squirrel leader." "What?" Lan Zhao was stunned. Zhenjin fell into deep thought. He realized that he was facing a difficult choice. But at the moment, Zhenjin couldn't make a decision. "I need to consider this matter carefully. All of you are dismissed and go about your own business." "Yes, sir. No matter what decision you make, I'll support you." ZD was the last to leave the tent, leaving behind these words. Chapter 37. The night was dark, and the bonfire brought light to the camp. From time to time, the crackling sound of burning branches could be heard, accompanied by sparks flying into the sky. This camp was not sturdy. Although a fence was hastily set up, it was too short and the fence was too short. Its defense against the attacks of ferocious beasts was negligible. At most, it brought some psychological comfort to the members of the exploration team. The real defensive measures were the large number of traps scattered around the camp. Once a ferocious beast attacked, these traps could form an obstruction and create a loud noise to warn the people in the camp. Of course, there were also night guards around the camp to provide another layer of protection. In the past, most of the exploration team members had already fallen asleep at this time. However, no one was sleepy tonight. Many people surrounded the bonfire and chatted with each other. The news about the ability of the flying squirrel leader and the predicament of the exploration team facing a food shortage was known to everyone. "What should we do in this situation?" "Food is the most important thing. Without food, we won't need any magical beasts. We'll all starve to death. No one is an exception because no one can go without food and drink. I think we should get rid of these flying squirrels. Even if the flying squirrel leader is very strong, most of the flying squirrels are just ordinary wild beasts." If you think like that, just wait for death. As long as the flying squirrel leader bites your flesh, you'll die with an electric discharge. Even if the flying squirrel leader is rare, we don't have many people. It's not enough for it to kill. Now that I think about it, it's really scary. During the day, the flying squirrel leader was only 5 steps away from me. Fortunately, it died in the hands of Lord Zhenjin. Can the flying squirrel leader really discharge electricity? Some people expressed their doubts. However, when they heard that this was the result of Sang Su's deduction, no one doubted it anymore. It seems that it's all thanks to Lord Zhenjin. If he hadn't killed the flying squirrel leader in one strike, we would have definitely died. In my opinion, we definitely can't touch this kind of beast herd. Perhaps we'll be able to find a better source of food next. Therefore, it's better to take a detour. Or perhaps it's better to find the main group. Hey, you're too naive. Will there definitely be food in the main group? Don't forget that we were sent out by the main force to explore the surroundings and search for food. I don't know how long it will take to return to the beach where we set off from and meet up with the main force. It is very likely that we will encounter even more powerful magical beasts on this journey. In the end, how long can our food last? Sang-soo lay in the tent and listened to the sounds coming from outside. He looked at the roof of the tent and knew very well that the food left could only last for 7 days at most. But at this moment, Sang-soo was more worried about the state of the team. Everyone had their own opinions. The morale of the team was already divided. Everyone had their own opinions. At this time, the leader needed to make the final decision. However, although Zhen Jin was in charge of this position, his prestige as a leader had not yet been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. The mutton incident seemed to be a good thing that could increase Zhen Jin's prestige as a leader, but it ended up causing the entire team to be poisoned, causing them to go through a lot of trouble and not be able to harvest enough food. Therefore, Zhen Jin could not consolidate his authority. Then, it all depends on this time, Sang-soo thought to himself. In all fairness, this was not a good opportunity. However, reality was always like this. It was cold and heartless, always placing unexpected and difficult problems directly in front of people. People were often caught off guard and could not be forced. Whether it was Zhen Jin, ZD, or Sang-soo himself, or the entire exploration team, they had all been forced into a corner by reality. Only by overcoming this difficult reality can you truly take charge of this team. Then, Zhen Jin, young leader, what will you choose? With this question in mind, Sang-soo slowly fell asleep. What should I choose? Zhen Jin was deep in thought. As a leader, he had no right to escape. He could only take responsibility. Now that the team is short of food, dealing with the pterosaur horde is one option to obtain food. But the risk is great and the exploration team is not strong enough. If we were to be electrocuted by the leader of the pterosaur horde, we would definitely suffer heavy casualties. But I need a great victory. A great victory to my heart's content is the ideal result. If it's a Pyrrhic victory and there are too many casualties, the remaining people will definitely be disappointed and will no longer look forward to my leadership. At the same time, the scale of the entire exploration team is not that big. If there are too many casualties, how can the remaining people help me compete for the position of White Sand City Lord? Other than this choice, Zhen Jin knew that he had another choice. That is to give up on this pterosaur horde and continue exploring, hoping to find a better source of food in the future. This choice can temporarily stabilize the entire team, but the food reserves can only last for 7 days at most. It's hard to say what will happen next. It could be a weaker horde, or it could be a terrifying magical beast that will wipe out the entire exploration team. If the food is strictly controlled and reduced as much as possible, it can last for more than 10 days. But the risk of doing so is great. Once food is scarce, people will panic. They will even be wary of each other and hunt each other, eating each other in order to survive. My prestige is not enough to suppress such people's hearts. If this happens, the entire team will not collapse but riot. It's fine if it's me, but ZD will also be implicated. While Zhen Jin was deep in thought, a thought suddenly popped up in his mind. This thought was so bold and terrifying that even Zhen Jin himself was shocked. If I'm forced into a desperate situation, will I kill others and feed on human flesh in order to survive? No, how can that be? If I do that, how will I be any different from those beasts and animals? I'm a temple knight. Zhen Jin felt deeply ashamed. The temple knights represented light and bravery. On the battlefield, the temple knights would always charge at the front. In life, the temple knights upheld justice, upholding kindness and protecting the weak. So it turns out that it's so difficult to become a leader. I'm afraid that I'm going crazy. Otherwise, why would I have such a terrifying thought? At this moment, Zhen Jin truly felt that it was not so easy to become a leader. A leader must shoulder their own responsibilities and not let down the trust of their subordinate. They must find the right path when they are confused and lead everyone out of the predicament. What's more, Zhen Jin's burden was far more than that. He thought of ZD. In his opinion, his fiancée had always trusted him, did her best to protect him, and never left him. He also thought of his family, his father who only had one arm left. He could not die. He had to become the Lord of White Sand City. This was the key step in the revival of the 100 Needles family. There was also his pride as a noble, his glory as a temple knight. As he thought, Zhen Jin's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. His chest felt stuffy and there was a feeling of suffocation. His tent was already the largest, but at this moment, the whole tent was like a monster's giant claw, constantly shrinking, as if it was strangling Zhen Jin's throat. Zhen Jin resisted the huge pressure. The voices outside the tent gradually faded. Most of the exploration team members got into the tent to sleep, but Zhen Jin felt that the pressure was getting heavier and heavier. After an unknown amount of time, Zhen Jin let out a soft cry. He suddenly bent over and sat down weakly on the military blanket, his back leaning against the only wooden pillar in the tent. Huff, 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 Zhen Jin gasped for breath, his forehead full of sweat. He felt an intense tiredness. This tiredness was not physical, but mental exhaustion. What should I do? Zhen Jin was still confused and distressed. Subconsciously, he half knelt on the ground and began to pray again. Sacred Heavenly Emperor, my God, your vision is above the clouds. No matter what kind of fog you face, it will not stop you from moving forward. You hold the reins of the huge empire in your hands, leading hundreds of millions of people to victory. You are so wise, so decisive, you can see through the trajectory of fate. Now, your loyal and humble believer is praying to you. Please show me the way, please clear the fog of fate for me, please protect me, so that I can protect the pride of the nobles and the glory of the knights. However, God did not respond. Zhen Jin waited. He was looking forward to God's response. Time continued to pass without a sound. It was a long wait. Zhen Jin half knelt on the ground, lowered his head, and faced the direction of the Qingming Empire. It was a stubborn wait. This time, Needle Gold showed unprecedented patience in her prayer. However, in the end, the cold aura of the night kept coming in through the cracks of the tent. It also went into Zhen Jin's nose and seeped into his heart through his skin. Zhen Jin's heart seemed to gradually turn cold, and his eagerness fell to the bottom. Zhen Jin realized the cruel reality. God still did not give him a response. He would not wait for any instructions from the Qingming Emperor. The tent in the middle of the night was full of darkness, without a trace of light. The young Zhen Jin half knelt on the ground, like a stone statue. After a long time, the stone statue sighed. He no longer half knelt, but stood up with difficulty. His legs were sore and numb. Zhen Jin stamped his feet to relax his muscles. His eyes were dull and his heart was heavy. He knew that he could only rely on himself. Without God's guidance, the road ahead was pitch black. But he had to keep going. Staying where he was would only be waiting for death, and it would also disappoint everyone. Life was like this. People were often forced to make all kinds of decisions by life when their futures were uncertain. Even people themselves knew how reckless this choice was. And people had to bear the consequences of their choices, whether it was bitter or sweet. Zhen Jin could only continue to think. Strangely, this time, he did not feel the same embarrassment as before. It was as if he had broken through a limit. Perhaps it was because God did not respond, so he completely understood that there was no one he could rely on. When dawn came, more and more birds chirped in the forest. Zhen Jin suddenly realized that an entire night had passed. He opened the tent's curtain and saw the morning sun. The sun shone through the clouds and shone on the half-dark forest. There was still white fog in the forest in the morning, and the air was damp and cold. Zhen Jin breathed in, but he felt refreshed. The moment he opened the tent's curtain, he was a wise and powerful leader who could see through everything and make the most correct choice. Even if he knew that he was not, he had to act like it. There was no longer any hesitation on his face. He had already made his decision. Everyone was quickly gathered and listened to Zhen Jin's series of orders. Lan Zhao, in the next few days, you have to continue moving stealthily and find out more information about the flying squirrel community. Huang Zhao, Baiya, Sangsu, you are in charge of choosing the wood. We need to make a batch of short bows. ZD, I need you to concoct a medicine. It's best if it works on the leader of the flying squirrels as well. Yes, Zhen Jin had decided to hunt down the flying squirrel community. Chapter 38. Zhen Jin gave orders continuously. Whether it was Huang Zhao, Lan Zhao, Baiya, Sangsu, or the others, they all obeyed the orders. However, Zhen Jin looked around and still saw the flickering gazes of the exploration team members. Zhen Jin shouted in a low voice, "Now, if anyone has different thoughts, raise them immediately. The Knights Templar will never punish anyone who dares to speak up." No one spoke. A few people opened their mouths to say something but hesitated. Zhen Jin's expression darkened slightly. He knew that he had not established enough prestige as a leader. Sangsu spoke at the right time. "Sir, your decision is undoubtedly wise. Although the leader of the flying squirrels can produce electric shocks that can kill people, their numbers are very small. Sir's archery and dagger skills have always been perfect. In the past period of time, we have encountered many herds of beasts. Apart from the sheep, this group of flying squirrels is the weakest. If we give up, I'm afraid we won't be so lucky to encounter a more suitable target than the group of flying squirrels. My suggestion is that we can work hard to come up with tactics. The right tactics can make it easier for us to defeat these stupid flying squirrels. After all, a human's brain is much smarter than a beast." "Very good." Zhen Jin nodded with a look of approval. "Scholar Sangsu, your opinion is very pertinent. In fact, we just need to get enough food. We can attract the flying squirrels in batches and control the scale of the battle. As long as we hunt enough food, we don't have to fight the leader of the flying squirrels head-on." Zhen Jin's words were actually a little taken for granted. The nature of beasts was difficult to fathom, especially when everyone was very unfamiliar with these flying squirrels and had only been in contact with them for a short period of time. On this island, creatures like the flying squirrels had strong traces of humans and were not natural creatures. Therefore, it was really hard to say what their habits were. Whether it was Zhen Jin or Sangsu, they all knew this logic. However, after this deliberate conversation, everyone was no longer as shaken as before. Some people's gazes became resolute again, and their morale rose to a certain extent. Zhen Jin's prestige had not been established, and Sangsu's combat ability was very weak. However, combined with their influence, they could still mobilize the enthusiasm of the entire exploration team. Zhen Jin was increasingly satisfied with Sangsu. He thought to himself, "Sangsu knows how to cooperate with me. Perhaps this is where he is better than ZD. Although ZD is the president of the Chamber of Commerce, she is still too young. She has spent most of her energy and time on magic cultivation. Although Sangsu has no power, he has served the nobles for half his life and has rich experience. All this time, he has been assisting me in controlling this exploration team." After breakfast, everyone quickly got to work. This place was a forest, and as far as the eye could see, there were trees everywhere. To make a short bow, he needed suitable wood. We now need two types of wood. One type of wood is used to make the bow arm of the short bow, and the other type of wood we will only choose the bark to make the bowstring. As for how to choose, I don't know. We still need to rely on Baiya and Sang-Su. Huang Zhao looked at Sang-Su and Baiya. The old scholar smiled. Although this island is full of strange mutated beasts, there are relatively few mutated trees and grass. I think these few types of trees are our targets. Baiya said, Lord Huang Zhao, my father and I have also cut down trees and made hunting bows. I took a rough look, and this type of tree is closest to my memory. Combining Baiya's experience, Sang-Su's knowledge, and Huang Zhao's personal experience of chopping trees, the three of them successfully decided on two types of trees. Then, Huang Zhao chopped down the trees. After all, he was a bronze-ranked warrior, and his strength was far beyond that of ordinary people. The blade from the blade spider was extremely sharp. With one slash, the tree slowly tilted and then fell to the ground. Baiya walked forward and cut into the tree trunk with the blade. Then, he skillfully pried open a piece of bark. The bark was dark green and very hard on the outside, but when Baiya turned the bark over, he saw the inner layer of the bark. The inner layer of the bark was yellowish-green. Baiya touched it and felt a smooth feeling on his fingers. He nodded slightly and commented, "This inner layer of bark should be able to make high-quality hemp rope." The three of them chose a big tree again. This tree was much thicker than the one they had cut down earlier. Huang Zhao pulled out the sharp blade that Jinjin had lent him and was about to start. Sang-Su stopped him. "Don't use such a sharp weapon, use an axe. This kind of sharp weapon can only be used by extraordinary people. Ordinary people still use axes to chop wood." Huang Zhao followed the advice and chose an axe to chop the tree trunk. Iron swords were easy to bend when used to chop wood. People would not do this unless they had no other choice. The exploration team brought a few axes with them. Originally, it was mainly to facilitate the collection of food, such as bananas, coconuts, and so on. Secondly, it was to chop out a path. If they found a stable source of food, it would be very convenient to have a convenient path. Huang Zhao waved his thick arm and chopped more than 10 times before he managed to cut a hole in the tree trunk. "If I could use qi, I would only need one axe to chop down this damn tree," Huang Zhao muttered, not satisfied with his performance. Although bronze-level qi could not be attached to weapons, nor could it cover the surface of the body, after it was activated, it could temporarily increase a person's physical fitness. According to the different qi arts, cultivators would also focus on the improvement of strength, speed, endurance, recovery, and other aspects. After chopping a few more times, the hole in the tree trunk finally expanded to the point of a qualitative change. Huang Zhao changed direction and pushed the tree trunk hard, pushing down the big tree. Then, he waved his axe and chopped out a section of the tree trunk. Then, he took the tree core and cut it into wooden plank. After Baiya and Sang-Su looked at the long wooden planks, they were very satisfied. Sang-Su let Huang Zhao deliberately bend this wooden plank. The plank showed that the toughness of the plank was very good. The three of them were happy, things were progressing very smoothly. "Let's go back and report to Lord Jinjin. It's time to bring people to chop down these trees." Sang-Su made a decision. The three of them were located near the camp. This place had already been cleared, so it was relatively safe. Soon, the three of them returned to the camp. Jinjin was in charge of the camp, overseeing the overall situation. After knowing the results of the three of them, Jinjin thought for a moment and asked Sang-Su, "How many people do you think are suitable, and how long will it take for us to get enough wood?" Sang-Su had obviously thought about it on the way back. He immediately replied, "Of course, the more the better, but sir, we have a few things to pay attention to. The first is the safety of the logging team. Generally, when logging in the more dangerous wilderness, patrols and guards will be assigned. Although the exploration team members are all warriors, their physical strength is limited. Logging is a very heavy physical work, and it will make people exhausted. As a result, their combat strength will also decrease a lot. If there is really a dangerous situation, it will be difficult for the logging team members to resist. The second is food. I suggest that we send some people out to gather as much food as possible around. The harvest will definitely not be much, but our food reserves have reached the warning line. Even if there is only a little more food, it will be good. Third, this wood can be used more. Not only can we make short bows, but we can also set up more defensive fortifications. On the way back, I communicated with Baya, and he knows many hunters' traps. We can set up more traps and make them bigger. It's impractical to deal with people, but those flying squirrels are wild beasts. We have a huge advantage in intelligence. Fourth, I think this is also the most crucial and difficult to solve. Our time is actually very tight, but whether it's the hemp rope for the bowstring or the bow arm of the short bow, they all need to be dried. It will take at least a day to make the bowstring and the short bow. It will take at least 2 days to dry. There will be very little time left for us to train. Just like before, Sang-Soo provided a lot of pertinent advice to Jinjin. Jinjin nodded. Sang-Soo was still as reliable as ever. Jinjin had always thought that Sang-Soo was the best candidate for the steward. It was not that simple to mobilize personnel. In this regard, ZD did not have enough experience. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were good at fighting. According to Jinjin's understanding, this team of brothers did not have much achievements in command. All they could do was lead the charge. Jinjin smiled at Sang-Soo's distress and calmly took out the potion. The next moment, Jinjin saw Sang-Soo's eyes light up. Jinjin said, "I have already prepared for this. There are 2 potions here. One can be applied to the bow arm, and the other can dry the bark that has just been torn off quickly. It will be done in 1 night. But be careful, this potion will only last for 1 day." These potions were all made by ZD on the spot. Jinjin and ZD had discussed the crossbows before, and these potions were the main result. Sang-Soo was overjoyed. With these, that's great. The lack of food made time very critical. The potions seemed insignificant, but in fact, they solved the biggest problem facing the exploration team. Jinjin then appointed Sang-Soo to be in charge of leading the team to cut down the trees. He also ordered Baya to collect food, accompanied by Huang Zhao, to be responsible for the safety of Baya and the others. On the other hand, they had to continue to clean up the surroundings of the camp. Huang Zhao was at the bronze level. Even if he couldn't use battle energy, his combat power was higher than ordinary warriors. But this way, everyone will be assigned to the logging team and the search team. There will be no one to guard the logging team, Sang-Soo said worriedly. The exploration team was originally quite large, but when Jinjin took over, there were only a dozen people left. After that, they were poisoned and their combat power and stamina dropped. A mission that used to require 1 person might now require 1.5, or even 2. Therefore, manpower was very tight. "Don't worry, I will personally be the guard of the logging team," Jinjin said. Sang-Soo was immediately relieved. Jinjin's vicinity must be the safest place. He had thought that Jinjin would be guarding ZD. Although her strategic significance on this island had decreased a lot, ZD was a mage after all. Sang-Soo pondered and said, "In this way, sir, are you going to let Lan Zhao guard the camp?" Jinjin shook his head. "No, it's very important to investigate the enemy. Lan Zhao still has to investigate the details of the flying squirrel community. He could do it alone. The others are not strong enough. They will only be a burden if they go." Sang-Soo frowned and reminded, "Then Lady ZD's safety," Jinjin smiled. "I've talked to her. She will stay in the camp alone. She is also a pharmacist and has ways to protect herself." If she encounters any danger that is difficult to deal with, our logging team is near the camp, and I can immediately reinforce her. Sang-Soo had no more objections. He knew that the exploration team was short of manpower. Jin's arrangement was already the best. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.